So good to be back. Nothing like a weekend off. Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Today's Monday, January 19th. 19 days into the new year. 346 days left. That's it. Live from the truthfunders.com studios right here in sunny downtown Burbank, California for KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network. I am your oh so humble host, Jimmy Church. Truth Funders. Truthfunders.com. If you haven't been there, I'm going to ask everybody right now, go to Truth Funders. You got an invention, a documentary, an expedition, a book. Everything under the paranormal sun gets funded there. Truthfunders.com. Big salute to the proud men and women in uniform all around the world. Fighting a good fight for us, defending that Constitution of ours, our right to freedom of speech. That's what this show is all about. Everybody listening all across the United States, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, north and south, east and west, far and near. Our good friends over in Europe, to the north of us, to the south, all the way over to Japan, Australia, New Zealand. Welcome. This is Fade to Black, the Monday edition. Don't forget about the podcast. If you've missed a show, you can't catch it live. You don't catch the rebroadcast on Dark Matter. Go subscribe to the podcast. Best $2 you've ever spent. Invest into the show. That's what you need to do. Faders.org. Great Fader cinema this weekend. Oh, man. Killer clowns from outer space. We got to get something lined up for this weekend. We'll talk about that. Faders.org. I was talking to everybody over at Contact in the Desert today, and pretty excited, man. Contact in the Desert is going to be amazing. And if you haven't been there to the new website, they're slowly getting it up and running. But the homepage is up. So if you go to contactinthedesert.com, very simple, you can see the lineup that they will have this year. And it is May 29th through the 31st. Yes, yours truly will be doing a few different things there. I'm turning down my cell phone. Again, I committed the biggest foul in all of radio. Left my cell phone up. Contact in the Desert. A great lineup this year. And we will be... go over to Contact in the Desert right now. Go check out the website. And scroll down. Look at the big poster. We'll have the poster up as soon as they finalize things. I think it's pretty close, though. Up on jimmychurchradio.com. We'll take care of that. But we will be broadcasting. We got a lot of events coming up here in the next few weeks leading up to Contact in the Desert. And at Contact that Friday night, we will be broadcasting live from the Lotus Room, which is the room directly behind the big giant hall. You know, we can't fill that thing. I don't know. Maybe we could. But that would be interesting. 1,000 people. But we'll be in the Lotus Room, which is behind there. Holds about 100, 150 people. So that'll be the studio audience that night. It's going to be great. We'll have 12 guests on the show that night, lined up and ready to go. It's going to be really, really cool. And I'm excited about that. Then on Saturday, I'll be moderating a panel. And on that panel, it's going to be the exact definition of the panel. It's UFOs and physics. So that's the basic title of the panel. But scheduled right now, it's going to be Richard Dolan, Stanton Friedman, Nick Redfern, Richard Dolan, Nick Redfern, Mike Barra will be on with us. You know what? This is radio. I don't have the notes in front of me. But anyway, and maybe Steve Murillo will be on that panel too. That'll be really cool. So that'll be on Saturday. We'll be interviewing and doing some other stuff for Contact in the Desert live. We'll have a little setup outside of the main hall there, and we will be interviewing all of the speakers for the staff there at Contact in the Desert with the video crew. That's going to be a ton of fun, too. And, of course, we have the events that are going on that night. We will be giving away tickets again this year. Okay, so we'll have a whole pile of tickets. I'm not sure the cost of the event itself, but I think the tickets are, north of $200, $300, $400 a ticket, something like that. I don't know what they are. You can go to the website and check that out. But we will be giving away a load of tickets. So all of you Fadernauts, good luck to you. We will start running the contest in about a week, maybe 2 weeks. So there you go. Let's see. February 6th is the Conscious Life Expo out here in Los Angeles at LAX. We will be there. Looks like we might be there all 3 days. We have Mike Barra's stuff on Friday night, and then on Saturday there is a panel with Sean Stone and Carrie Cassidy, so we'll be there for that. And then, of course, the meet and greet and stuff Saturday afternoon and evening. That's going to be a ton of fun, and so we will be there. So that's Conscious Life, February 6th. And and then right after that, Friday the 13th, February, is the debut, the premiere of Season 2 of Hangar 1. So we have a lot of exciting stuff going on right now. I'm pretty fired up. And so with all of that, let's get this show cracking. Today, singer from America, the band America. Well, he's also from America. Dewey Bunnell is 63 years old. He sang hits like Horse with No Name and Ventura Highway. 2 great songs. And he is 63 years old. Funny thing about America, the band, when they were all in junior high and high school over in Germany, I believe, I'm taking this from memory, I have no notes, but they were all like, I believe, Air Force. They were Air Force brats. They lived on an Air Force base, and they formed the band in high school. And they called it America because they were over there and they kind of missed home, that one of those vibes. And that's how America was formed. And there you go. From high school, and to write songs like that is pretty amazing. Anyway, Dewey Bunnell today, 63 years old. Also today, comedian Paul Rodriguez, funny man, is 60 years old. How do you make the cut? Well, you got to be funny like Paul. Got a bunch of dead guys' birthdays today. Our dead guys' birthdays today are Janis Joplin, 1943 to 1970. Phil Everly of the Everly Brothers, 1939 to 2014. And singer Robert Palmer, 1949 to 2003. Palmer died in a Paris hotel room from a heart attack on the 26th of September, 2003, at the age of 54. Can you believe it? And so I'm a big Robert Palmer fan, man. I thought that dude was a total class act. And who can forget those videos? Remember with the brunettes, the black-haired, the brunettes with the guitars dancing in the background. Remember that? Man, MTV was cool back then. But so I went through and looked at his list of hits. And non-hit, I mean, and I was like, that's right. Check this out. It wasn't, Some Like It Hot. Remember that? Get It On, Bang a Gong, the remake. Remember that? Addicted to Love. I Didn't Mean to Turn You On. That was a good song. Simply Irresistible. You remember that? And Bad Case of Loving You, Doctor, Doctor. Palmer had the ability. He could do a hit song. I will say this. Back then on MTV did, they still do, but they did their music awards at the Universal Amphitheater. And my guitar tech back then, a guy named Rob Cazares, actually went, when you could do this, he went and bought tickets to the MTV Awards. And I'm going to guess and say this is 1985, 1986, right in there. And I said, oh, you got tickets? He goes, yeah, man. And they were like, I can't remember. They were like a lot of money back then, like $40 each or something. And I go, where are we sitting? And he goes, dude, man, we're in the second row. What? In the center. No BS. So we go, and I dress up in my best Don Johnson, man. Long hair, white suit, pink turquoise tank top, bunch of gold chains, whatever. So we go, and we sit right there, right in the center. Right, I'm looking at the microphone. Right, it's just like dead in front of me. And the opening act, lights go down. It's Robert Palmer. He comes out and nails it. And I just remember the excitement of the MTV Awards. Back then, it was a huge deal. And just watching Robert Palmer and watching him nail it like he did. He did 2 songs. And it was just something that has stuck with me over the years. And just going back and thinking about Robert Palmer today and going through all of his albums and the Power Station. And he was just a class act. And so there you go. Robert Palmer died 2003 of a heart attack at the age of 54. Happy birthday, Robert. There you go. So to fire it off on Twitter, I just want to know, does everybody love Robert Palmer like I do? Oh, Mark Davitt just said Robert Palmer was one of the cool ones. Okay, cool. You guys are with me on Twitter. Right on. Okay, so let's just light up Twitter right now. What's your favorite Robert Palmer song? What's your favorite? Addicted to Love's pretty good. Some Like It Hot. I didn't mean to turn you on that might be mine right there. So there you go. All right. Follow us on Twitter right now at JChurchRadio. That's what you want to do. At JChurchRadio. Hashtag DMRadioNet will get you into the sandbox. Come hang out with everybody tonight. Tonight on the show, we have Gerald Clark. Been trying to get Gerald on the show for a year. A solid year. I could follow our email conversations going back a year. We finally got him on the show. Anunnaki, Nibiru, today, life, the connections. It's all going to be solved tonight with Gerald Clark. We'll have him on in the bottom of the hour. Tomorrow, remote viewer Dr. Angela Smith will be joining us. And on Wednesday, Stuart Swerdlow and the Montauk Mind Control Time Travel Program. Stuart will be with us Wednesday night. And, of course, Thursday night is Fader Night Open Lines. And now we're going to have a busy show tonight with Gerald. We've got a lot of stuff to cover. We'll see if we can squeeze in a few phone calls at the end of the night. If we do, 323-825-5045 is the call-in number. You can also Skype in Fade to Black 14. You can also email throughout the show tonight. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com will get the job done. You can also go over to the contact page where we use non-NSA, specially encrypted servers. You can do it right there. If you have any questions for Gerald, that is hashtag F2BQ in TweetDeck, hashtag Fade to Black Questions, F and the number 2, BQ, F2BQ. We'll get questions straight to Gerald. Let's get to a couple of emails before we break. Email from Trevor in the UK. Trevor says, just wanted to salute you on Laird Scranton from December of last year. I just listened to it on YouTube. What a show, what a show. Wow. Towards the end of last year, you mentioned a certain Jordan Maxwell might be coming to Fade to Black. Do you have any updates on this? The updates are, I'm not so sure what's going on with Jordan. We have reached out through back channels. He's not picking up his phone, by the way. Reached out through back channels. I would like to have Jordan on the show. And so that's it. I'm not going to say anything else. But then Trevor goes on to say, also, I keep plugging for Gerald Clark. Come on the show. I just got this email today, by the way. It's like, Trevor, I know you're over in the UK, but have you checked out the website? He says, I think he's a vision on the Anunnaki and will make you scratch your head so much you'll have to wear a cap to cover the bald spots. Boom, boom. Get him on ASAP. All right, Trevor, so we decided we'll bring on Gerald tonight just for you. And then Trevor ends with, keep bringing us the news we don't know anything about. Right on, Trevor. Trevor listens to this show. Another email from Terrence Walsh. He says, I've just started listening to the Greg Ford interview for the second time because I think this is another one of yours that ranks pretty high. I'd also like to say I'm just loving your shows, and I'm telling as many friends over here in the UK. Oh, 2 UK emails back to back about your shows. Thanks, Terrence. Deborah Cox writes, and this is all, I didn't edit this out. This is her email to us. And still, they don't want to count Pluto as a planet, even though it is in orbit and has 5 moons. She's right. We'll be talking about that tonight on the show with Gerald Clark. Keep the guest requests coming. Always remember, this is bespoke radio for the masses. And don't you ever, ever, ever forget that. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We are only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. That's what you want to do. Hashtag DMRadioNet. Shoot me an email, Jimmy at JimmyChurchRadio.com. This is Fade to Black, the Monday edition. I'll be back right after this. Do not touch that mouse.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil 3-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, we have Gerald Clark, Anunnaki Nibiru. Tomorrow, remote viewer Dr. Angela Smith. Wednesday, Stuart Swerdlow will be joining us. And, of course, Thursday, Fader Night, open lines. Let's get to some news that you know nothing about. Let's make you smart. At least 50, I'm going to say this again, at least 50 U.S. law enforcement agencies have secretly equipped their officers with radar devices that allow them to effectively peer through walls of houses to see whether anyone is inside, a practice raising new concerns about the extent of government surveillance. Those agencies, including the FBI and the U.S. Marshal Service, began deploying the radar systems more than 2 years ago with little notice to the courts and no public disclosure of when or where or how they will be used. The technology raises legal and privacy issues because the U.S. Supreme Court has said officers generally cannot use high-tech sensors to tell them about what's inside of a person's house without first obtaining a search warrant. The radars work like finely tuned motion detectors, using radio waves to zero in on movements as slight as human breathing from a distance of more than 50 feet. They can detect whether anyone is inside of the house, where they are, and whether they are moving. As creepy as that sounds, I only assume this was going on a lot longer than the last 2 years. Think about that for a second. Time for a grassroots campaign right now. You have to have a search. You have to have a reason. Look, got a hostage crisis going on inside of a bank. I get that. I understand. But if they have the ability to roll up on my home and just point something at it and check it out like that, I've got issues. Open Minds TV reported January 6th that after crunching the numbers of all the official reports of unidentified flying objects made to the Mutual UFO Network, the total number of documented UFO sightings around the world totaled 8,680. That is 1,034 more than was reported in 2013, which was 7,646. In the United States, where most of the sightings reported to MUFON take place, the number rose by nearly half to 7,048 as compared to 6,457 in 2013. Okay, everybody wants to know the top 10 states. Okay, coming in at number 10, West Virginia. Number 9, Maine. Number 8, Missouri. Number 7, Colorado. Number 6, Alaska. Number 5, Pennsylvania. Number 4, New York. Number 3, Florida. Number 2, Tejas. And number 1, California. The reported theft by Chinese hackers of blueprints for the United States' F-35 Joint Strike Fighter amounted to, get this, 50 terabytes. 50 terabytes of classified information. That's right, according to documents leaked by NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden. The hackers are believed by many U.S. officials to be affiliated with the Chinese government. 2007, China saved 25 years of research and development, according to a U.S. military official. That's a quote. That's the name of the file, cited by the Washington Post in a 2013 article covering the breach. Previous media reports said that several terabytes of data was stolen. But according to the new documents published by the German magazine Der Spiegel last week, the actual amount was far higher at 50 terabytes. Check this. Equivalent to 5 libraries of Congress. The data reportedly used by China to build their own advanced fighter jets includes detailed engine schematics and radar design. The reported hack also includes some 24 advanced weapon systems, including the Aegis ballistic missile defense system, the literal combat ship designs, and emerging railgun technology. That's insane. Insane. They should have had some false information in there. Watch those Chinese fighters fall out of the sky with some faulty airfoil. I cannot believe this. It's just, Also on the Snowden front, British security agency GCHQ has stored thousands of emails from journalists working for the world's biggest news organizations, according to another batch of Snowden leaks. Emails from the BBC, Guardian, New York Times, Washington Post were all saved by the GCHQ, allegedly as a part of, and I'm quoting here, a test exercise conducted by the agency. Journalist communications were among the 70,000 emails harvested during one day in November 2008. They were obtained by one of GCHQ's taps into fiber optic cables used to transfer information on the internet. The leaks show that GCHQ had classified investigative journalists. They classified them as a security risk alongside terrorists and computer hackers. I'm not making this up. According to GCHQ's information security assessments, investigative journalists are classified as having the ability to influence threat sources, particularly those reporting on defense issues. One document intended for military intelligence reads, and I'm quoting, "Journalists and reporters representing all types of news media represent a potential threat to security." Continuing, of specific concern are investigative journalists who specialize in defense-related exposés, either for profit or what they deem to be, and I'm quoting, of the public interest. That scares the crap out of me. It might soon be time to change all of those grade school dioramas of the polar system once again. Astronomers think at least 2 more planets exist, reports Universe Today. It's all over the internet. I got at least 10 emails about this today. The posts are over on Facebook and Twitter and so forth. You guys have seen it. In the 2 studies from the UK and Spain, scientists say that the planet's existence is the only way to explain why objects are behaving as they are in the nether regions beyond Neptune and the recently demoted non-planet Pluto. These objects, called extreme trans-Neptunian objects, or ETNOs, I'm not making that up, should be zipping around randomly, but are instead doing so with unusual symmetry. Like that, unusual symmetry. Just rolls off the tongue. Unusual symmetry. White House officials favor 2 primary tactics when they want to kill a news article, according to Condoleezza Rice and her testimony today. They can, I'm quoting here, they can essentially confirm the report by arguing that it is too important for national security to be published, or they can say that the reporter has it wrong. Testifying in the leaked trial of Jeffrey Sterling, we are following that closely here at Fade to Black. A former CIA officer, Miss Rice, described how the White House successfully persuaded Times editors not to publish an article about a recent operation to disrupt Iran's nuclear program. James Risen, a Times reporter, ultimately revealed the program in his 2000 book, State of War, and said that the CIA had botched the operation. Prosecutors used Miss Rice's testimony to bolster their case that the leak to Mr. Risen had harmed national security. Now, check this out. Under President George Bush, the White House urged reporters to withhold accounts about many of the contentious aspects in the war on terrorism, the existence of a secret prison in Thailand, the Central Intelligence Agency's interrogation and detention program, warrantless wiretapping, and government monitoring of financial transactions. But Obama is no cleaner. Doesn't matter. It's all D.C. The Obama administration has persuaded reporters to delay publishing the existence of a drone base in Saudi Arabia, the name of a country in which a drone strike against an American citizen was being considered, the fact that a diplomat arrested in Pakistan was a CIA officer, and that an American businessman was working for the agency when he disappeared in Iran. And finally, Fox is considering an X-Files reboot. That's right. You've heard about it. The network CEOs Dana Walden and Gary Newman reporting that the series creator Chris Carter and co-stars Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny are interested in reprising their roles. The X-Files was canceled after the 9th season finale in 2002, but there is a problem. Anderson is currently starring in NBC's Hannibal, while Duchovny will appear in an upcoming NBC series, Aquarius. Both actors have got to get out of their contracts with NBC before anything moves forward with Fox. And with that, let's roll on out of here. Tonight, Gerald Clark. When we come back tomorrow, Angela Smith. Wednesday, Stuart Swirlo. Thursday, Fader Night. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black, and I'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark Matter.
Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Fade to Black. Tomorrow night, remote viewer Dr. Angela Smith. Wednesday, Stuart Swerdlow in the Montauk Mind Control time travel program. But tonight, Gerald Clark. Gerald Clark is a 1994 graduate of the University of California at San Diego. Gerald holds an MSEE in Electronic Circuits and Systems and a BS in Computer Engineering, both from UCSD. Isn't that the party school of the United States? I'm going to have to ask him about that. Gerald is the author of several papers in the communications and electronics field and is well known for his work in the San Diego high technology industry, awarded several patents in the free space optical laser communications field while serving as vice president of engineering at LightPoint Communications Incorporated. Gerald's career involved companies like Laurel Telemetry and Instrumentation, where he led the final phase of the Global Star telemetry and command modem designed for Qualcomm. Very cool. Used to command, monitor, and control 54 LEO Global Star constellation satellites. During the years 1996 to 2002, working as a telecommunications executive, Gerald's business travels took him to various parts of the world, exposing him to a plethora of cultures which acted as a catalyst for his research into mankind's earliest technologies and accomplishments, including the cultures of Mesopotamia and the surrounding areas of Turkey, Egypt, Persia, and Iraq, eventually leading to the cuneiform inscribed tablets left by the Sumerians. His book, The Anunnaki of Nibiru, made him one of the world's leading experts on the subject. And his new book, The Seventh Planet, Mercury Rising, deals with the questions like, if the Anunnaki created mankind, then who created them? And are the Anunnaki remnants attempting to establish a one-world government, dark lords, biological design, all of the above? Tonight we are going to connect the dots, and I would like to welcome to the program right now, Gerald Clark. Gerald, how are you tonight, sir? Gerald, are you with us? I see you. Okay, Gerald, we do not have a connection. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Okay, Gerald, if you can hear me, we got to reset. I don't know what's going on. There he was. Let's call him right back. I think Gerald didn't hit a button. I don't think you hit a button, did you, Gerald?
I'm here.
That was a great introduction, man.
Yeah, that was like the mystery introduction. Sorry about that.
That was now it's anticlimactic. And after a year of working so hard to get you on the show, and then we start like that. It's like, what? Oh, how are you tonight? You all good?
I'm good. Hey, I wanted to wish a warm welcome to you and all your listeners. And I wanted to say thank you for being so patient. I know we've been on this track for about a year.
It was funny when we first reached out to you a year ago. You are one of the most requested guests on the show, and we tried our best. And you were like, Jimmy, I'm busy. I'm researching. And Jimmy, I promise, Jimmy, I'm just finishing this thing. I'm working, and I've been a big fan for a long time, and I didn't want to put the pressure on you, but here we are. It's a year later. Welcome to the program. I'm totally fired up. And are you ready?
I'm absolutely ready. Let's get ready to rumble.
Now, this is just an open-ended conversation. I don't have questions in front of me, as you know. We're going to start where we start. We're going to end where we end. We have so many different subjects to cover, and I'm going to warm the audience up to this and all of the Fadernauts out there. I have followed your research for a long time, and I've certainly listened to a lot of your presentations and radio programs over the years. Now, and so I know how far and wide your research goes, and how we can start to narrow things down to the events of today. So with a lot of patience, we have all the time in the world tonight, so let's do it the best that we can. I'm going to start off with the most boring question of any interview, which is, but I'm going to change the tone of it a little bit. You come from a heavy tech background. Do you ever discuss any of this with your buddies on the job, or is this a secret life?
Well, actually, I did not. I didn't discuss anything about the Anunnaki until about, I guess it wasn't even 3 months before I released my book, and it was off-site at a restaurant with somebody that wasn't from my company, but they were a field application engineer that did business with us. And he brought it up, and I just kind of sat and listened. And I was shocked because no one had ever brought it up. And so,
well, did he bring it up, Gerald?
Listening.
Yeah, Gerald, did he bring it up because he knew about what you were about to write about, or did he bring it up because his own personal interest?
I think it was his own personal interest. And then within a week, I saw him again, and I didn't lift the skirt very high, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
And so the next time we got together, I brought my genealogy table that I'd been working on, and I said, well, I'm about a couple of weeks away from releasing, and his eyes just lit up. So I was one of the only people that didn't judge him and listen to him.
Right.
He apparently talk about it at work, and they thought he was just crazy. They had him painted as some nut job.
Well, yeah, and when you're on a career path and you're dealing with the patent office and you're on the forefront of major technology, not only with the internet but communications in general and satellites, and then somebody that you're trying to get a contract with or trying to clear patents through finds out, that you're investigating Sumerian tablets and Thoth.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's and the Emerald tablet. Yeah, there wouldn't be a good road to go down.
Yeah, well, in the business place, the workplace, generally, it's been pretty clamped down in terms of discussing religion or politics. There's a lot of surface level discussion of sports and things that are innocuous, but nothing of any importance, unless it's job related.
Well, I'll tell you, last year I was at a convention unrelated to ufology and fringe science. It was a technical convention. And so I'm there. And I'm talking with some old friends of mine. They were like, hey, Jimmy, man, we dig your show. And I'm like, why are you whispering? well, hey, I want you to meet a friend of mine. Brings over this guy, whatever, his name's Brian. And he goes, Brian loves your show. I'm like, dude, why are you whispering? Well, it's just, I'm like, wow. So when you're out there in the mainstream, these are old friends of mine and they're big fans of the show, but they didn't want people to know that they were listening. And it's kind of strange how the mainstream looks at this genre. It just kills me. Kills me. So
it's very frustrating. And the problem is to find somebody who will have a dialogue with you without defending their belief in the first place. I mean, might as well go back to Greece and sign up Socrates because no one wants to do it.
Right. Well, there's also the fine balance, though. And the fine balance is sometimes you get into conversations with people with beliefs that are a little bit too strong and a little bit too steadfast, where you need to have sometimes, a healthy dose of skepticism thrown in.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
You said you have an echo.
Well, I'm getting one off my mic. I wanted to make sure you're not getting it.
No,
if you're not, I can tolerate it.
Okay, if you can tolerate it. The other night I was on a radio show on a Friday or Saturday night, a terrestrial program out of Nevada, and I had an echo on the phone. And I must have sounded like a spaced out dude from like some concert from Haight-Ashbury because I could not I couldn't concentrate. I'm listening to the echo and I'm listening to myself and I'm just, and I was there for 15 minutes dealing with that. And I hung up the phone and I just thought, you know what? A lot of people just thought that I was a real doofus. So,
well, for all the chopper pilots that are out there listening to me, they've got a complex, vibratory, unbelievable environment to focus within, and those are my brothers. So it's not going to disrupt me at all.
All right, cool. Let's do this. Let's take a. I've heard you do this before, and you do this in such it's elegant how you do this. So I'm going to hand the stage to you for 5-10 minutes. I want you to tell your version of who the Anunnaki are and how they got here. You do it. It's just really well done. So I'm just going to throw it.
You want the slick version, right?
Yeah, just go for it.
We'll make it flow and stop me if I leave anything out.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Who are the Anunnaki?
Okay. All right. Well, by looking at the Sumerian tablets, we get an indication from these people they were visited by someone from another planet. They served them as slaves, and they had no problem with that. So, who were the Anunnaki? According to the records, about 450,000 years ago, they had some atmospheric problems on Nibiru. They were caught in an orbit that they didn't originally exist in their Enumilish creation account. And so they were in a retrograde orbit around our sun, and each time they came close perihelion, basically their atmosphere was suffering. So they were looking for a solution, much like we are right now, to shield CMEs and radiation from the sun as it's peaking in its cycle. So similarly, they had a problem. So 450,000 years ago, according to their record, they sent their premier scientists to the Earth, which they were observing. They're in retrograde orbit, so they're seeing all the planets as if they're on a mobile observatory. Okay, so they probably had very good records about what planets had what, especially resources that they were interested in. They left the planet. Enki took approximately 50 GG, these are subservient workers from Nibiru, to the Earth. He landed in the Persian Gulf, and he actually was planning to verify one of his precursors that had actually been sent there on exile. I'm not going to go into that. His name was Alalu. And he verified there was gold and had planned to mine it from the Persian Gulf, out of the waters, both monoatomic and colloidal. So from that point, his workers and he set up the first city called Eridu, Eridu. And in my new book, I could give a couple of Google Earth images of the city and a map of the temple district, which is very interesting. Okay, so he's here. He's trying to get gold. And apparently, they've been working for more than a shar being the orbital period of their planet, which is 3,600 years. And they've been working longer than that and still weren't making the progress that was expected of them. Imagine how much gold you would need to ionize and put in an atmosphere to shield, depending on how big your planet is. So, in my mind, this was a losing battle ultimately, but they're going for it. Okay, so Enki's trying to get gold. He's not getting it fast enough in the Persian Gulf. His father, Anu, the one that sent him, redirected him to the mines in South Africa. And now this is circa probably 445,000 years ago, because right at that point, his half-brother was dispatched from Nibiru to come to the Earth. His name was Enlil. Okay, and I have to explain these two characters a little bit. So we got the names pegged down. Enki is the scientist. Enlil is the bureaucrat, and he's a military-type commander. He earns the title Lord of the Command, whereas Enki used to have Lord of the Earth. That's what he has when he was first here. Then he got kind of demoted to Lord of the Sea. So those guys were fighting over titles from 445,000 years ago on this planet. Okay, so Enki vectored off to Africa. Enlil came down. Anu also joined them, and they cast lots to decide who was going to do what. Anu ended up going back to Nibiru. Enlil got the Mesopotamian region where their bond heaven Earth was going to be set up. Their mission control centers was later established at the city of Nippur. Their landing site for their aircraft was at Sapar. And Sharupak was their medical center, where another character that's going to show up here pretty quick, Ninhartsog, who's also known as Isis, had her medical center there. And it also turns out to be the headquarters for the king of Sharupak, who we know as Noah. We'll get to him.
Okay.
They're trying to get gold in Africa. They've been now we're going to jump over into the Atrahasis. They've been working in the mines for many, many shard. It turns out almost 268,000 years went by my math, and I did this in my new book.
Now, a shar is their year.
Is 3,600 Earth years.
But it's 1 year to them.
It's 1 year to them.
Okay.
Now, this is the same number that shows up in the Sumerian Kings list as they counted their rulership in shars. Very, very interesting. Okay.
We'll
now
get,
we're down at the mines.
We'll get
These
back.
guys are being brutal. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said we'll get back to that in a second. I just wanted to ask really quick for the chronology here.
Mm-hmm.
Enki, how old was he? I mean, how long did he live for, I should say?
Well, if we knew exactly when the cosmogony account specified by them in the Enuma Elish, when that celestial battle took place where their planet struck Tiamat and created the Earth and our moon.
Right.
If we knew exactly when that was, then we could probably answer that question.
Because we're looking at...
He's mentioned in that account, okay? He's one of the key players in the account. And so is his son, who's called Mumu, who's called Ningshita, who's called Thoth. Okay, so he's in that account too. What I'm going to tell you, based on what I know right now about their ages, these beings are immortal. Period.
Gotcha.
They can reincarnate in any body they want, in any dimension they want, and they're truly immortal. So when you see these lifespans in the Sumerian Kings list,
right,
the longest one was over 42,000 years.
Yeah, 28,000
by himself.
Yeah, 28,000 years, 30,000 years, 40,000 years.
Well, then you go down to Bad Tiberiya. He served 12 shars.
And
whereas the other one was only 8 shars.
Yeah, so that's 48. That's over 48,000 years.
Exactly. So when you start looking at that, you go, well, how long did they live? They served that long. Well, they tell you they're immortal. They don't die. Their energy doesn't need a body to exist. And we're going to go deep in that tonight, okay?
Yeah, we're going to go deep into that.
You want to go back to the mine in Africa?
Yeah, that's great minds think alike.
So the Ajiji are down there busting their butt for hundreds of thousands of years. And we know this. We found the mines. The Anglo-American Mining Corporation owns them. Okay, you can go look it up. And they finally had enough, and one of their fellow gods riles them up, tells them to burn all their tools and revolt. And his name was Allah. And he had another name. I'll go ahead and give it to you now. His other name is Nanar Sin. And he's Enlil's, the commander's son. He takes this Ajiji lot. They've got weapons. They're very angry. And in the account, they surround Enlil's house at night. And Enlil goes, he's like, well, what am I going to do? He summons Enki, a couple other beings off this Anunnaki council. There's 12 of them that run everything, 6 males and 6 females. So we've only mentioned a couple, Anu, Enki, Enlil. Now we've got Allah, who is Nanar Sin. He's actually on the council as well. Okay. He leads these Ajiji workers to his dad's house and demands relief. These guys are brutalized. They've been working day and night. They need relief. That's what he asked. Okay, so Enlil summons his father and Enki and a few other members of the council and says, what do I do with this rabble-rouser? Okay, so he sends his gate guard, Nusku, out to go find out what their terms are. And they basically said, we're not doing this anymore. Find us a replacement. At that point, we start to glean some of the character attributes of these players. Anu says, well, looks like they've been overworked. And Enki says, it looks like they've been overworked. And Enlil says, well, I'll kill one and let's get them back to work. That kind of guy. Brutal taskmaster, okay? So at that point, Anu and Enki overrule him. He puts on a fake cry routine, and they decide to have a council meeting and discuss, whether we're going to replace them with tools or we're going to replace them with more meat, okay? So I go into intricate detail on the thinking between a machine and a meat host or a primitive worker. Now, recall, they were using meat before with the Ajiji. They've been doing this for 268,000 years, and they didn't bring in tools then.
Right.
So they preferred meat, okay? So I just want to put a fork in that.
Right.
They revolt, and at that point, Enki chimes up during the council meeting and says, hey, there's some bipedal hominids down here on the steppes of Africa. Let me give them my mark, and we'll upgrade them to be a primitive worker to replace the Ajiji.
Hence,
they bandied it around and decided that was the best solution. So he and his half-sister, Nin Hartzog, who was Isis in Egypt, were sent off to a lab in South Africa called the House of Shimti, where he essentially messed around with all kinds of chimeric trials to see if he could produce a sentient primitive worker who could follow their commands. Ultimately, he ended up using his own DNA with what appears to be a Neanderthal ovum, and they did in vitro fertilization into his half-sister with that zygote, who was Nin Hartzog. She carried the baby to full term, and in their account, they called it the Adamu or the Adapa. Okay?
I'm with you.
From that point, they had a problem. When you take a jack and you mix it with a horse, you get a mule, and it's impotent. That's what happened to them. They ended up with a workforce, this first one, that could not procreate. And maybe it was by design until they determined that its efficacy was what they wanted. Well, ultimately, this became an issue because the Ajiji are still in the mines, and they're really upset. They want relief. And I don't think these trials happened overnight. I actually allocated in my book an entire shar for them to come up with this. Okay, it could have been shorter. So at that point, they finally succeed, produce the first offspring. He can't procreate. They also produce a mate for him. And at that point, neither of them have the right genetic construct. Well, this is where the next player comes in. The second DNA creation, the junior Dr. Frankenstein, okay? And this was Ningshita, and he's the one that shows up in the Enuma Elish. They called him Mumu, and in the Adapatale, he's called Gazeta. Well, his real name's Ningshita, okay? So he looks at the DNA in this lab, discovers that there's a problem with not enough chromosomes. The Anunnaki had a superset of the DNA of what they gave to us. He ended up splicing the second chromosome and fixed the problem. Okay, and you can see that in our DNA today. They were able then to procreate. They were escorted up to Eridu, back at Enki's first city, and they were going to be watched to determine whether this genetic upgrade was sufficient. Okay, so they got a labor force to meet, and they probably got Gantt charts and resources and names next to them that don't exist yet. Okay, so there's a sense of urgency here. At that point, Enki and Enlil now owning the Mesopotamian region, but not Eridu. It still belongs to Enki. That's where his temple was. So they're there watching the primitive workers in the garden. And this is where the Old Testament version in Genesis 1:26 comes out. Let us in our image and our likeness create man. Well, this is a plural statement. Now you realize there was a council of 12 involved, not one being who wrote the rest out of the account and made himself God.
Right.
Okay. All right. Let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, let's keep that. Let me stop you there for a second, because you raise an interesting point. I'm not an expert on the Bible, but when you say when the Bible states, and I want to make this clear, the Bible says us, not me. Right?
Yeah.
And I find
this is a problem for Zechariah Sitchin, von Doniken. They both looked at that and said, wait. And of course, then very shortly after there, it starts talking about these Elohim or Nephilim.
Right.
So all of a sudden, the us, and there's another plural term, and you just connect the dots. You shouldn't even be able to get out of Genesis without scratching your head bald.
Oh, yeah, you heard the email. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, because it's saying us as a race. It's not saying me as an individual creator, and I find that very interesting.
Even more specifically, if you read the Voucher Hayes account, the first tablet, the us is the members that were there that made the decision while the Ajiji were surrounding Enlil's fort. Okay, their names are named in there. They weren't all there. There weren't 12, according to the record. Ninhartsog, who was called Ninma, or Beli Ili, she was there. Enki was there. Anu was there. Enlil was there. And then their gate guard, for sure, Nusku was there. And I think Ninurta was there. So I got to go back and look. But they were there.
What about, now we're going to jump ahead and we need to come back to this. But in the Lost Book of Enki, all of that information came off of one tablet, didn't it?
Well, I've been poking around. Because, that was the only book that Sitchin ever left us that had no reference. And I thought, that was an intentional thing he did there. I think he was trying to hide his source.
Well, I always thought
snooping around.
Well, I've been
snooping around.
There
was a set of records found in Sapar, their old spaceport. And then when you read the Emerald tablets and realize how they got there, they had a chronicle listing of everything from Enki's perspective of what went down during this mining mission. And that's where I believe he got this account.
Well, I always thought, I assumed the reason why he didn't do footnotes is because he would have had the same footnote on every page. Right? That it came from only one tablet. That's what I thought the intention was.
Well, my understanding, there was a series of tablets there. And they were preserved, they were fired, they were in a golden chest, and they were in chronologic order. So I don't think there was just one. But I think, and this is just me, and this is just a hypothesis, I think he was working with some agencies that were disclosing this to him. and he was not allowed to disclose that knowledge.
Oh,
I don't know.
interesting. Okay.
It's very similar to when you get into the Emerald Tablets later. The Dorial got access to these real Emerald Tablets that were held in a pyramid, and just for a period, he got to copy some of it and release it. It's very similar.
Yeah, have the I don't want to segue to the right or to the left right now, but
we're in
have
we
the
got people hanging.
I know. Have do you think the Emerald Tablets? Have you seen the official one? Have you seen any photographs? Have you seen any evidence? I've heard all of the descriptions, and
there's actually one that showed up in Europe. It was a summary version of the 13. Okay, not including the 2 supplemental. There's a total of 15 I give in the book.
Right.
Okay, the two last ones were not supposed to be released until a much later time than the 1925, and we can talk about it.
Okay,
so,
Gerald, are you still getting an echo?
I am.
Okay, let's take a quick break. Unplug your microphone, plug it in. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back in 2 minutes.
Terrific. Thanks so much.
All right, that is Gerald Clark. He's with us tonight, Anunnaki of Nibiru. Mercury Rising, his new book. We will be back right after this. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Stay with us, everybody.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal God, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? My name's Brian Taylor, Ninja Badass Extraordinaire, and this is JimmyChurchRadio.com. JJCR in your face.
JimmyChurchRadio.com on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Tonight, Gerald Clark. Tomorrow night, Angela Smith. Wednesday, Stuart Swerdlow. Thursday, of course, open lines, Fader nights. All right, Gerald, you got your microphone fixed? Gerald, you got your microphone fixed?
I do.
Don't make me nervous.
Okay.
All right. Before the break, we were talking.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about Michael Tellinger for a second, because with his research, he's such a brilliant mind. I love the guy. Mm-hmm. But he has uncovered evidence of 100,000-year-old and older gold mines in South Africa, and that obviously predates metallurgy by my calculations 95,000 years. Okay, so
yeah, exactly.
I could be off plus or minus a couple thousand years, but there certainly wasn't any need for humans. I don't know why they would need gold 100,000 years ago, but the evidence of those mines is there, and now we've got major global mining corporations that have swooped in and claimed these mines. Is that right?
That's correct. One of the mines that Zechariah told us about, mining companies that it was active in South Africa, was the Anglo-American Mining Corporation. And so I looked into them, and they actually had some documents on their website that I put in my first book, talking about when they carbon dated these mines that they purchased. Okay, there were thousands of them, not just one or two.
Right.
And some of them, they had talked about finding carbon inside the mine that was 60,000 years old. And then another one later on was close to 100,000 years old. So all of a sudden, this was when I was in my Anunnaki corroborating story mode. When I saw that, I asked myself, who could have been on this planet with the knowledge to mine or smelt it and be in advanced metallurgy? Who was that?
Well,
and I was stuck until I got the Sumerian story, and they told us they were doing it. The Anunnaki were.
With when you look at, I hate to say it, but I'm going to do it right now. When you look at Göbekli Tepe and the evidence of metallurgy at Göbekli Tepe, which again is coming into that magic year of 10,500 BC, 11,500 BC, and Göbekli Tepe wasn't supposed to exist. And you look at the timing of Mesopotamia and the Sumerian text and the advance of humankind, which happened to be overnight. Suddenly, we have governments and farming and the wheel and fire and all of that stuff. Everything just happened overnight. There's a connection there, and it seems that as days move by us, that the Anunnaki accounts become more and more clear to us all, and it's something that needs to be discussed and explored now. I can't. I think Zechariah, and this is what I want you to comment on. I think Zechariah came and went. In other words, his first books, I mean, he had 25, 30, 40, 50 million people on the planet listening and reading to his every word. And then the evidence kind of shifted the other way when Nibiru didn't show up and there was no evidence of a planet and so forth. Well, that's what we were being told, I should say. And so that kind of went. But now,
was that between 76 and 83?
Yeah, exactly. Well, 83 was the first evidence. So we'll come back to that. Good. You're good. You're good, Gerald. But now today, Zechariah's kind of feeling pretty good. I wish he was here to enjoy this, because now with the discovery of the outer rings and what's going on in our own solar system, something feels a bit fishy here. And maybe, just maybe, Zechariah was right, at least maybe 90%.
As far as this theory goes, all you needed was probably 2 or 3 hard pieces of evidence. Number one was the gold mines for me.
Right.
And we had the written records. Okay. It wasn't some speculation from some artifact that we found. I mean, we had lots and lots of text to decode. And then ask yourself, is it true or are they lying? That's where you were at. It was so unbelievable. And everybody probably experiences that when they see this story and realize they were created as a primitive worker to replace another primitive worker. So I wanted to touch on a little bit of a timeline. We know that our last ice age ended at about 10,000 BCE, so no, about 12,000 years ago. Well, the Göbekli Tepe is about 12,000 years old. And I was traveling back and forth to Turkey, and I was focused on a city that Jared Diamond told us about, which was Catalhaya, an obsidian trading center, which was purported to be 9,000 years old. So how is it that Mesopotamia at supposedly 3,800 BCE and Egypt at 3,100 BC, how do they fit in to Göbekli Tepe? Well, if you go back to the Egyptian priest of the city of Sais, he described multiple floods in the Mesopotamian region, 4 major ones and several minor ones.
Right.
So what I'm telling you is those pre-diluvial cities in Mesopotamia, Bad Tabira, Sippar, Nippur, Uruk, Ur, those ones.
Right.
Ur, yeah, definitely Ur.
Yeah.
So Ur and Nippur were very, very closely coupled. Ur was the capital of Samaria twice, and Enlil's son, Nanar, was the king of Ur in the 2nd dynasty. Okay, I included a lamentation of Ur, including this conversation between Allah, Nanar Sin, and his father, Enlil Yahweh. Okay? So very, very important document. If anybody has any question about the relationship between Allah and Yahweh, it's right there in black and white. Lamentation of Ur. Okay. So once the floods came, in Noah's flood, and we got to get there from the Ajiji miners back where we are, actually from the Garden of Eden forward to Mount Ararat. We got to get there.
Okay.
So we know that the last ice age, there were earth perturbations, and it looks like that's when whatever this Noah story happened, and it landed him on Mount Ararat. Okay, because we can backtrack using the Sumerian kings list, because after the first Sumerian kings, which there were 8 or 9 of them, it ended after 176,500 years with the last one, and of Noah's flood. That's what it says it right on the tablet. So you got a time marker right there. It's really, really helpful. So from that standpoint, this flood hit Mesopotamia. It wiped out everything. And these cities that were there were pre-diluvial, before 12,000 years ago. Actually, they go way back. Eridu was the first city on this planet built 450,000 years ago. And they built on top of it and on top of it, just like most ancient cultures do.
Right.
So the fact that they're saying it's 3,800 BCE, well, that was the last resurgence following the last flood. Okay. Well, before that, let's go back to the Garden of Eden, find out what happened there, fast forward with this flood, and then land on Ararat, and we'll see how Göbekli Tepe fits in if you want.
Exactly. And let's do that. And the funny thing is, when you start to put the pins in the map, when you're looking at Ararat, you're looking at Turkey, you're looking at Göbekli Tepe, you're looking at Karahunj in Armenia, and all of these cultures are kicking off right at the same time in the very same part of the earth. And none of this is coincidence. You cannot explain it away. So let's go back to the Garden of Eden, and the way that you present this is an eye opener. I'm already scratching my head. I've got a bald spot right here in the back.
I want to say the symbolism gives the whole story away.
It does.
Okay, so we're in the Genesis account. We end up in the Garden of Eden, and there's the Adam and the Eve, and they're naked, right? Well, they're there because they've had a genetic upgrade by Ningshita. And Enki, the scientist who created them, with his DNA, is there with his half-brother, the commander, who's calling himself God already. Now, he's already written everybody out of the account. Now he's got to demonize Enki, right? So it's Enki's medicinal garden in Eridu. He's been here for thousands of years. He's probably got every medicinal type plant from the Amazon, from the desert, all over the planet in his seed bank there in Eridu. Okay? So he's got these 2 primitive workers. They bring him up to see if they can procreate. And at that point in the story, in order to lambaste the primitive workers, Enlil tells them, you can partake of anything in the garden, but don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And otherwise you will surely die. That's what it says, right? And Enki, the snake, the snake represents the double helix of the caduceus, the 2 snakes winding around a vertical pole, ending up 2 wings coming out of the side with a little knob on top. That was the sign for a geneticist, okay? Anyway, so then he gets referred to as the snake. So the snake in the garden says, no, if you eat, you'll become aware. Your consciousness will be changed, and you'll know the difference between good and evil like we do. So what did he do? He gave them a free will choice to either kowtow to Enlil or listen to Enki. Well, they chose to listen to Enki. And they didn't die. They woke up, and exactly what he said happened. They had a consciousness-changing experience. And then the rest, the throwing them out of the garden, all that, because the original sin. Well, the reality was Enlil wanted them as primitive workers. Look how he treated them in the Atrahasis account, down in the mines. He didn't want them to wake up and become one of their staff members. Give me a break.
Right.
They're primitive workers, and keep them down there. I don't care if they have clothes or not, but as long as they're getting the job done and they're on this side of the bell curve, good to go. Okay. So at that point, Enki intercedes with the Adapa, puts him in his temple in Eridu, trains him in everything he knows. And there's actually an account in there we can skip if you want, where he actually gets taken to meet Anu up on Nibiru in order to evaluate this primitive worker and kind of see what his genetic construct is and see what the constraints were that Enki established for this being. So I'm going to leave that one for the book, okay, because it kind of takes us off track.
Okay.
So now we're about to have a problem. After 600 years of this primitive breeding work or programming, the Anunnaki were successful at getting their labor force replaced. And now our progenitors, yours and mine, are in the mines piling out gold and ore in South Africa. And the Ajiji are in their hammocks, right? Going, it's your turn now.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So the breeding program was very successful. After 600 years in the Atrahasis account, we are told that the noise of the humans was so great, bellowing like a bull, that Enlil wanted them gone. He calls a council meeting, and several of the members are there in the Atrahasis, and he starts going through it. And I don't want to get too negative here, but I want you to tie what's going on now, with what's happening here. The first thing he did is introduce a mortally fatal disease called Sarupu disease to call the population. Nice guy, huh?
Yeah, right.
Then he did another one that caused real problems with birthing. He was causing stillbirths with this one. Trying to cut out producing any more. Right? No more primitive workers. We must have met our quota. At that point, Enki starts running antecedents with the protagonist of the story, who was Atrahasis. And it turns out, I'll tell you right now, Atrahasis, Noah, was Enki's son. That's why they're communicating the way they do. And later in the story, before I forget, I want to tell you that so you understand. He was his son, and he discloses it to Enlil at the end of the story. Okay, so but it helps to know it now. So, Atrahasis is like, wow, every time one of these incursions, these genocidal attacks were brought against the people, he sought out Enki, said, what should I do? And he basically taught him various nonviolent resistance techniques, much like Gandhi taught. And he shamed them. And this went on and on and on. So Enlil's trying to get rid of him. Enki's working with his son the best he can. They've sworn him to an oath to allow this to happen. He's not the highest rank. He doesn't have the trump card. He's doing the best he can to stop his commander brother from wiping us out. Okay? After 6 years of Sarupu disease, the Sako disease, he cut off the food, he cut off the water. They were using some energy weapon to change the weather patterns, just like HAARP. Okay? At that point, the people finally resorted to selling each other into slavery, and by the next year, they were eating each other. It was cannibalism. Enlil must have been really pleased. But he wasn't. He wanted them all gone. He called Enki aside, said, bring a flood, you're the Lord of the water, make them go away. And this is what happened. Enki told him no. And somehow the flood came in anyway. And we're going to fill that in when we get to the Emerald Tablets. Okay, it's all exposed there. So Enki did not bring the flood. Now, there are theories, and Zitzer wrote about this and others did, that because of what was happening with our planetary disturbance, Nibiru came in close perihelion, that's what was causing the expected flood. So they knew about a flood coming, swore an oath not to tell primitive workers, so they'd all be wiped out. So whether Enlil, he was the commander, Anu was back on Nibiru. Okay, so Enlil had the buck stopped with him. He was responsible. Okay, so he swore everybody to an oath. And Enki realized his son was going to die. He was the king of Shuruppak, Noah. Okay, so now go back to Genesis. Look at the 600-year mark where the flood came, and Noah was there. And you realize that it correlates exactly with the Atrahasis, verbatim.
It's kind of funny also when you see how this is written in the text. It is so similar to our actions in culture today. It's very funny how they wrote about this so many thousands of years ago.
Very sophisticated, right?
Yeah, it's sophisticated, and it's just like world events today. All of the things that we do and experience. It's
imagine
astonishing.
200 years ago talking about genetic engineering. We wouldn't have gotten it. Now it's everywhere, and we look at in the past and go, they were doing it too.
Yeah, and disease and how they dealt with it, and everything else. It's pretty funny.
Exactly.
It's like a modern tome. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite stories when we do the Noah story. So Atrahasis was known as Noah. He was known as Ziusudra. And one of the other documents from the Epic of Gilgamesh, that's one of my other favorites, he's called Utnapishtim. Okay, so he's got lots of names. Well, about this time, this king of Shuruppak is approached by his father, Enki. And instead of Enki talking to him, he basically starts talking to the wall of his reed hut, disclosing what's coming. Now, this is kind of a sneaky trick, right? He's not really violating his oath, but he's getting the message to his son by proximity, vicarious oratory receptors.
Right.
So he tells his kid, the king of Shuruppak, guess what? Flood's coming. And the kid goes, that's frightening. What am I to do? Tell your council members and other princes in Shuruppak that Mesopotamia has been given to Enki's half-brother, Enlil. They're at odds, and I got to get out. So I got to go to my father's domain, Africa. That's what that story he told them, okay? So that's the real story. He built a boat. Enki's genetic samples from the city of Ridu that were gathered by him and Hardsog all over the planet were put in a small container and then put on this vessel that was partly, the building of which was partly facilitated by Enki's sneaky engineers. Okay, he actually put a navigator on there that was going to be in charge. They were just along for the ride. Now, Sitchin describes the approach axis to Mount Ararat coming up the Persian Gulf, right, bisecting the Tigris and Euphrates. And as a pilot, did his theory about these equivalent radii cities that were pre-diluvial, and that their IP point was the highest point in the region, which is the southern part of the Zagros Mountains in Turkey, where Mount Ararat can be seen. So they were truly using that as an initialization point to orient themselves on Sapar, where their landing approach was. Okay, so they knew about that if a flood came up the Mesopotamian plain, that'd be the highest point to escape to, and the flood would be washing them north, not south, unless it came over the mountains in Turkey, over the the Strait of Bosphorus, and washed over the Zagros Mountains down in the Mesopotamian plain. That happened a couple of times in the 4 major floods that were described by the priests from Sais. Okay, but this time it looked like it was going to push them north. So they got in, and that's where they ended up. Okay, so that was circa the last of the end of the ice age, which was about 12,000 years ago. So now you see that all of the Fertile Crescent genetics for seed grain crops and all the agricultural products that we were primarily using came out of that region in the Fertile Crescent, which included Mount Ararat up into Turkey. So I was not surprised to see genetic studies verify that the resurgence of man started there. Well, let's finish the story.
Okay.
Finally, the flood comes. And you know, in the Bible, it tells one duration. In the Sumerian account, it tells another duration. And it turns out the one in the Bible is Enki's rank trying to smear him, I'm pretty sure. He describes in his account it was a different duration. But either way, it flooded everything. Noah and his family, a few foreign mammals that they had on site, they kept them. But it was mostly the genetic DNA bank that they wanted to preserve life, which we would do today, the same thing.
Exactly.
So their navigator gets him onto Ararat, and the water starts to recede. You know, near the story of sending out either the crow or the dove. Right. It's in the same. They do the same thing. Okay, in the Sumerian account. Well, at this point, Atrahasis sets up a temple there to be kind of thankful for his dad for saving him and his family. And about this time, the Anunnaki are in low Earth orbit in their craft surveying the flood damage. Ninhardsog is there, Enki's there, Enlil's there, and those are the primary ones. There may have been other ones, I can't remember. But they're discussing looking at these bodies in the Mesopotamian floodplain washed up like little logs. And Ninhardsog, the one who carried the Adopted a full term, is mortified that Enlil has allowed this to happen. She must not have quite understand the full extent of what they planned. He planned all of them gone, not one living being left. That was his plan.
Right.
Okay. They must have had enough gold. I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm not privy to their Gantt chart, resources and milestones that were completed. But I would assume that the primitive worker population would be coincident with those Gantt chart milestones achieved.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly.
So she sees all the primitive workers all over Mesopotamian plain just wiped out as they're flying up to Ararat for some reason. Don't know why they chose that route. And about that time, Enlil sees the vessel on Mount Ararat in the Atrahasis account. And he gets very riled. He's like, "We, the great Anuna, swore an oath that no life was to survive. Why is this? Why is there a being there? This must be Enki's fault." So they land, go investigate. Atrahasis is there with his family. They're not really in the scene. They're kind of backed off out of the scene. I'm not sure, but Atrahasis is right there. And Enki faces down his brother about that time and says, "Look, our mission is not done here. Who's going to provide the labor and the food if we wipe them all out?" So at that point, Enlil backs off, gets real, really righteous, and decides to give Atrahasis eternal life on the spot. Wow. Now, I want to explain something about Atrahasis. Enki was his dad, and you'll learn this in my first book, and it's on my genealogy table. Yes, the Bible shows Lamech and Amzara being, or Batanesh being the mother, but in the accounts, we know that Enki was Atrahasis' father. Okay, so at that point, they come to blows. Enki stands down with Enlil, tells him, "Hey, they're going to survive," so he must have convinced him that they're going forward. He gets eternal life. And this is a big problem for Gilgamesh. Noah is only 50% pure Anunnaki DNA. His mother was a primitive worker. Did not get the mitochondrial DNA like Gilgamesh did from his mother, Nin's son, and his father, Lugalbanda. His mother was a full-blown Anunnaki, so he was 2/3 pure. Atrahasis is only 50%. Now he's got eternal life, and the king of Uruk, Gilgamesh, wants to know how he's going to get that too. So that's what his whole story is about, going to try to find eternal life, and he looks up Utnapishtim, who is Atrahasis, who is Noah.
What about
so now Noah's got eternal life. He's got his family sitting there. They go back and forth to Nibiru, decide what seed bank is going to be allowed for the remnants, and that's where we find out that Dumuzi and Nishida have taken the Adapa up to meet Anu on Nibiru, and Dumuzi stays back for a shar. Nishida gets a seminal mission to come back to the earth and be mankind's teacher.
What about the myth and Hey Gerald, what about the myth and legend of Gilgamesh and Noah being one and the same?
Well, I don't believe so. Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk in 2900 BCE, just down the street from Ur and Nippur. Okay, he was kind of in the Enlilite camp because Enlil owned that territory. So when Gilgamesh, being a king, find out from the king of Shuruppak that he got eternal life, there was a little problem for him. So I believe that's the reason that he started his whole quest to leave the city of Uruk and go find this out. Okay, in the story, you see that he sought out Utnapishtim to find out what did he know about eternal life that he, as the king of Uruk, didn't get.
Okay, I just got an email in from Sheila Garcia, and it It's exactly what we're talking about here. She says, according to Sitchin's work, Adam and Eve were both Enki's offspring. Subsequently, Eve's son, Cain, was Enki's also. Cain's wife was then listed as Luluwa, a full Anunnaki daughter of Lilith and Enki. This would mean that Cain's and Luluwa's offspring would be 7th, 8th Anunnaki. Do you agree with this?
Well, it's possible. What you got to do is look at the contribution of the mitochondrial DNA. So what they were playing this game was, I got my genealogy table. I'm going to put it down so I don't make a bunch of noise. Got me going there. Yeah, I've got the listing for Cain, Noah, and Zara. So if we want to dig into that, we can.
Okay. Well, then she goes on to say, if so, and it sounds like you do, doesn't this put us?
Well, let's talk about the mitochondrial DNA contributions and how it could possibly stack up.
Well, before hold on, stay with me. Listen to this. If so, doesn't this put a significant slant on the reverence that the Masonics put on the Tubal Cain, who I believe is 6th generation away from Cain? Do you believe that Jesus came from Cain's line instead of Seth?
Yes, I do, and I have it right in front of me. This was the Tubal Cain line. Was actually, he was the progenitor of Ham, and this in my new book is the very key point in connecting who Thoth was, Kemzar and Thustra, who was Ham, the 10th archon of the age of Capricorn, to the being in the Emerald Tablets who calls himself Thoth the Atlantean. When you realize that, you'll realize what's going on with the secret societies, the Masons, and the Illuminati. And I exposed it fully in my book. You will have no question what happened.
Well, have you? I know you're going to say yes. I know that I have. I have gone through all of the Emerald Tablets text, or the ones that are available. Spend hours and hours on it, and the more that I read the Emerald Tablets, even if let's suppose they were just written 100 years ago, I don't care. Or they were written 10,000 years ago. It doesn't matter to me. What one thing is for sure, they're not a modern phenomenon that was written last week. And when you read through those, it's like it's modern society. It is an absolute freakish thing to read, the Emerald Tablets, and I think it's very intelligent. And I recommend everybody, when you come into a show like this tonight, come in armed and read the Emerald Tablets. It's a real eye opener. And you know what? Just like the Bible, it doesn't really matter. It's a good read. It's a really good book. That's
well, I want to add something in addition to that that's quite interesting. In the opening of the tablets, Thoth begins to describe how they're encoded. If you'll notice when you read them, there's a rhythmic poetry to them. And I just did the audiobook, so I got this experience, and I didn't really expect it. He says that if you put your eyes on his sacred emerald tablets, these were very guarded when you go back and read about it.
Right.
If you do that, you're able to create a frequency in your mind. He calls it an Atlantean attuned encoding in the document. In other words, imagine you put your eyes on something, you're reading it in a certain way, and it's creating a rhythm that's also entraining your brain. That's what he did.
Yes.
It's amazing. It's an amazing experience to not only just read it, but read it out loud or hear it read out loud, which I did on my audiobooks. The Emerald Tablets was one of my favorite parts to read out loud.
I went and listened. Who was it? A couple of years ago, I listened to somebody's audio version of the Emerald Tablets myself.
That's why I redid mine.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. I'm brain freezing.
I'm going to name any names, but right toward the end of the Emerald Tablets, Thoth says, "Don't bring me the profane. Don't bring them." So if you're using profanity and reading his words, you've already missed the mark.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Imagine what Thoth would have done to Well, listen, go back and read what he warns anybody that deviates from his teachings, dog meat.
I'm looking.
Plain and simple.
I'm looking up right now. It was. I'm zoning in. It was Josh Reeves.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say that, but I just took it down off my website because once I studied these, and I'm probably on my 50th or 60th read, I've been reading these for a long time, I finally realized having anybody that's doing that or dishonoring those tablets that way just needs to be slightly rebuked because maybe they didn't know.
Yeah, well, and I hear you, and I know what you're talking about. You're talking about Josh's use of profanity throughout the reading of it, but he does get through it, and he does read it correctly. But
I appreciated that. I listened to it, and I clenched my teeth while I was going through there. But I appreciate him doing it. But approaching that tablet that way, I wouldn't recommend anybody doing that ever.
But what's funny when you listen to Josh read it is you get Josh's reactions because he's getting those reactions that you're talking about right now.
You know, I have on my list, I want to go to Emerald Tablet 15 where it says, don't bring me the unprepared and the profane. Yes. See what he said when he got to that part.
Man.
Josh is a good guy. I'm not disparaging him.
Oh, no, Josh is a great guy. And I understand what you're saying about his version of the reading of it. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. And, because I know Josh like I do, listening to him read it, I'm right with him, man. It's like you're sitting next to him.
Well, if it's brought you into the point where you're rereading it, like Foth tells you to, read it 100 times, he tells you, until you get it.
Right.
That's serious.
Yeah. It's
like a college-level graduate text.
And like I said, with the and we need to move on. I don't know how. I love getting sideways though. With all of the with all of the images of the Emerald tablets on the net, can you recommend? Is there anything that is semi legit? Is there anything that you would put your stamp on?
I put one in my book, and there was a single summary tablet that was developed, and it showed up in Europe about 645 AD.
Right,
and it was very, very scrutinized by all the major minds, including Leonardo da Vinci and several others. So they were aware of this, but it didn't. And it was written in the Atlantean language, but it wasn't the full disclosure that D'Oreal gives us in the text.
Right.
It was just a summary version. So they kind of sequenced the information out, iteratively letting it out.
I don't want to sound naive here, but I am when it comes to the Emerald tablets. When you're looking at some of the images that are on the net, and it's all we have. There isn't much out there. The language that's represented there, what is that?
That's the Atlantean language.
Right.
And in the introduction, Thoth comes right out and says, these are my Emerald tablets. I wrote them. Here's how long ago I did it. And he tells you the entire story emanating from when he was born on Atlantis to the time he landed in Egypt and set up the mystery schools. Really telling. First-hand account. Not a second-hand account, a first-hand account.
Right.
So now I want to touch on something real quickly.
Okay.
Everybody likes the story of Atlantis. Well, if you go into the reference I gave, you can read both the Timaeus and the Critias and get the first-hand account from these Greek geniuses, Solon and Plato and Timaeus. And they give us a lot of information about the city. And I think that's been the genesis for pretty much every treasure hunter that's gone after Atlantis, is that data.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of information in there that I expose in understanding the relationship between these Anunnaki astronauts and how they were getting along. So Poseidon actually had the city of Atlantis. It was given to him by Anu, this whole region. And it turns out to be connected with the Atlas Mountains that are on the northern part of Africa that are now underwater.
Right.
Okay, so that's near the pillars of Hercules, just like it says.
Right.
So anyway, the point I want to make is if you look at my genealogy table, you'll realize that Poseidon, who was Enki, had a son who was Ningshita Thoth. Okay, so now all of a sudden you realize they were together in Atlantis, and in the account, Ningshita, right before Atlantis is destroyed, is sent by his father with a new mission. Now remember, he was given the mission by Anu to be mankind's teacher, and he's still going to do that. But now he's going over to Egypt to establish this new civilization. And in his records, he said he did it 50,000 years ago, and he ruled from 50,000 to 36,000 BCE.
I want everybody, you can go to Gerald's website, by the way. You can either go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on Gerald's name, or it's geraldclark77.com. And so the tables, do you have the King's List there too as well?
It's all in, I think it's all in my book. It's between the first book and the second book, I have it. The problem is it's quite long, and to put it in a 6x9 book where you can read it, it's very difficult.
Right.
So I'll tell you what, I'm going to make a note right now. I'm going to post it on my website.
Okay, cool. Man, you're the man. Let me ask you this. There has to be a good story behind this. Where did you first get your hands on the King's List?
Wow, it is a good story, and I'm starting to tell it in my autobiography, actually. I should have told it in my other books. How did I get where I got? After reading all the Sitchin stuff about the year 2002, I didn't start writing in 2004, but then I got shut down. But by 2009, I had this story in my head, and it was pretty solidified because I'd been corroborating both with Harrington about the IRAS information that was released on Nibiru or Planet X, the gold mines, and all the cuneiform tablets we had, finding Gilgamesh's grave, and on and on and on. So we had a lot of these players that were starting to get corroborated. So I lost track of where I was going there.
The King's List.
King's List. Okay. So about this time, we planned a little vacation back to Washington, D.C. And the kids wanted to see the Capitol and things like that. And I had an ulterior motive in that I wanted to go see Egypt on the Potomac. Okay?
Oh, they have a boat tour that does that.
I want to go check out.
Wait a minute. Gerald, stop.
Yeah.
You went on the boat tour on the Potomac? The Potomac?
They call it these symbol tours around Washington, D.C. You'd expect to see Christian symbols everywhere, right?
Right.
But they're not. They're symbology from Egypt all over the place. And Greek gods, but hardly anything Christian. So I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. So they would give you a tour in D.C. called Egypt on the Potomac.
Right.
So you could go see these different statues and things, and they would give you the story.
I've heard about it.
Well, anyway, it turned out I'd been looking at the symbols for these beings, tracking them all the way back from Eridu, from Uruk, and I knew what their symbols were. I knew the Caduceus was Enki's that got handed off to his son Ningshita, and he became Hermes Mercury and carried it to Greece and Rome. That's our American medical assimilation symbol for health, right?
Right.
The chiropractors, the AMA, and they do it in Britain too. They've adopted his symbol. So following that symbol, I kind of knew who they were. And you're going to see in my new book that on one of the shields, the Etruscan shield of Ham, Zarathustra, that that eventually became the five-pointed star. In one orientation, it represented Isis. In the opposite orientation, it represented Ningshita. Okay, remember, these two have been involved in the genetic modification of man, or carrying one of them to full term, the Adapa. Okay?
Right.
So very seminal beings involved in this creation count these two share a similar symbol. So I saw this symbol in the streets of Washington, D.C., and in the male orientation, you're looking at the five-pointed star they call the pentagram. In the other orientation, it's the star on our flag. Okay?
Right.
So all of a sudden, I see this pentagram touching all these major monuments in the streets of Washington, D.C. You can see this on any tourist map. And I put it in my book, and I outlined it so you can see it. Well, the necklace point at the astral star emanating emerald jewel between the two horns of the goat turns out to be Scott Street Circle on 17th Street, right down the street from the Scottish Rite Temple, which is at 1633 17th Street. So if you draw a line from the temple down to Scott Street Circle, it looks like a chain holding a pentagram.
Interesting.
I'm like, okay, this is too much.
Right.
So I go and walk this thing to see if maybe it's just an illusion. I walk this pentagram. I stopped at Scott Street Circle, and I sat right there at the emerald jewel of the pentagram that's connected on a string right up the street to the Scottish Rite Temple. Just tripping out, right? I'm meditating, going, wow, why am I on this crazy journey? And eventually, I'm on my way over to the Library of Congress to get the Sumerian Kings list. That's what I'm there for. Okay, the next day. So I'm sitting at this spot. I'm just having this profound experience going, wow, I feel the all-seeing eye, and it's permeating me. This is frightening. So I walked down the street, ended up at the Scottish Rite Temple, the 33rd degree headquarters, got their little information, and I scheduled a tour. Okay, but that next day I went to the Library of Congress, took my boy Matthew, who is a senior at Caltech right now. Hey, Matthew. And my other boys at Berry College, Michael. Call out to Michael. Good job. And so Matthew's with me, and we're looking up the Sumerian Kings list and all this other crazy stuff. And I find the original that was recorded by Berossus in 330 BCE for the Greeks. For the Babylonians. And I get my hands on this thing, and here's the first city, Eridu, where the first king shows up. His name was Alalim, the one that served for 28,800 years in the city of Eridu, Enki's first city, remember?
Yep.
So all of a sudden, then, I'm starting to freak out here. Like, this is real. This is real. This isn't research anymore. This is real.
Right.
None of this document's fake.
Right.
Okay. So the next day, to add to the crescendo, I end up down at the Scottish Rite Temple, and I've got these beings in my head who I believe are Enki and Ninurta and Enlil and Isis, and I'm looking for them in this building to see who's in control here now. Or are they related? Is there a connection to the Masons?
Sure.
I really didn't know at that time.
Right.
Well, after a 2-hour tour leaving there, I can assure you, after I got my little commemorative tokens from them, and seeing the temple room, they allowed me to take pictures of anything I wanted, which I did. I walked out of there, and I was truly frightened. I knew that I'd stepped on something that was bigger than me, and it shut my writing down from 2009. I didn't write it again until 2013.
Why?
It really.
I understand you were disturbed, but what about it made you stop?
Well, I think the feeling made me stop. I found myself sitting on the steps out in front for a while, and I was decoding all the language that was written on the steps, looking at Isis' statue depicted as a sphinx out in front, going, what in the heck? And I had a real problem because there was an all-seeing eye in a shape of a triangle on the building, but it had a double eagle symbol over it. And that's where I got freaked out because I knew whose symbol that was. And it went all the way back to Mesopotamia. It was Enlil's son, Ninurta. And I put that in my book. There's a picture of it. Exact same symbol. So I was asking myself, I read the creed of the Masons in their museum, and in my mind, it was noble. This had to be an Enkiite organization that was lifting and raising consciousness. That's what they were known for. Especially Ningshita setting up the mystery schools. That was he was doing. He was taking hairy barbarians and graduating them to fourth dimensional beings.
Right,
and what do you think Enlil must have thought about that?
Well, and what do you make of at that time? Not only with the creation of the mystery schools, what Thoth was doing as well, and leading up to all of this, how all of this technology seemed to land at one place. I say it all the time on this show, Gerald, but it is just stupid to go into denial mode and put your head in the sand. But when you have the zodiac, the astronomy, the wheel, farming, governments, not only that, but controlled religion, all of this, written language and math and everything all in one place. And then everybody that was living, between the Tigris and the Euphrates River, said that we were taught this, and it came from the Anunnaki. How
they didn't have a problem with it.
No,
they knew they were created by them, and they were there to serve them. We're just finding it out.
Right. So
exactly.
How do you explain that if it wasn't the Anunnaki? That's my point. In all of your research, if it wasn't the Anunnaki, how did it happen?
Well, there's a theory by Jonas Salk. He was in San Diego. He was a genetic researcher. He had a belief called intentional panspermia, which means life that's this complicated has a genetic code that's written with a language that looks like a computer lexicon that predicates sequence. It's very complex. Had to have been seeded from an intelligent life force not of this planet. That was his theory. He calls it intentional panspermia. There's another theory called unintentional panspermia, where the seeds of life from a meteor, some other form of impact with the Earth transfer the seeds of life from the creator of all. Well, now that you read the Enuma Elish, you realize not only did a moon of Nibiru strike Tiamat, which became Earth, but also Nibiru itself, which was teeming with life. So, and I want to leave kind of a science fiction thought for you that'll probably blow your mind. In one of the Emerald tablets, Thoth is talking about some very advanced beings he encountered when he was being showed multiple dimensions and how the whole hologram is set up for us, okay? Mm-hmm. We're going to get to that. And he encountered some beings that he said had the power of Yolton, that could essentially imagine anything in their mind and manifest matter using light. I mean cities, I mean buildings, temples, anything you could imagine, they could do it with their mind. And guess what? One of those who had the power of Yolton turned out to be the dweller of Atlantis. Enki himself had this ability. Wow. So now you go back and see where he sacrificed the being in the Atrahasis to create us. He did a reverse exorcism on him, took his energy out of his body and put it into the Adapa on the spot with no lawyer. But, he had that level of command to create avatars out of energy. It's amazing.
Well, don't you think that I thought when Salk, I believe he had just won like the Nobel Prize. He had just won something at that
discovering
time.
DNA.
Yeah, for discovering DNA. And when he came out with that off-world panspermia theory, it freaked out some people, and it kind of got some legs.
I was one of them.
Yeah, it got some legs, but it kind of went away too as well.
Yeah, it got buried.
Yeah, it got buried. And it's one of the more eye-opening things. And for a guy like that who comes along, discovers DNA, gets his Nobel Prize, and then goes, well, you know what? Probably we got all of our intelligence from somewhere else. And
guess how that affected me. That happened in my hometown of San Diego, and it was going on at the Salk Institute right down the hill from my university where I went to school.
Right.
It's right there. So I knew. When I found out about that, I was like, wow.
So is it true? I mentioned this in the opener. Now that you just mentioned SDSU, seriously, is it the most?
University of California, San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego. The most partying school in the United States. That's what they say.
That's San Diego State.
Oh, that's San Diego State.
Well, I'll bet you it's a close second. University of Colorado at 420.
Yeah. Right. All right. This just came in email. Does Gerald believe those bloodlines of the Anunnaki are the reason all of our presidents are related to each other? I had to read it. That's from Mark.
Well, if you follow Lawrence Gardner's premier genealogy research, the answer is yes. Even though their bloodline is so diluted, they're deluded. to think they have any authority from their blue blood to kowtow over the 99%. I doth protest.
Let me. Okay, I want to get back to one thing that I've got to back up before I let this get out of my brain.
Okay.
So Nibiru, its last orbit, we don't know if the last collections of gold, they drained the Earth or whatever, they were done here. But that last orbit that swung around, how many years ago was that?
Well, this is where you have to look at the records and decide if they're telling the truth.
Well, was that at the flood?
Anu was on the earth in his white temple of Anu in the city of Uruk, the home of King Gilgamesh.
Right.
And he describes a ceremony where he's there with a few of his kids, and they go out on the steps of the ziggurat looking at the sky to see their planet cresting the horizon. Now, I believe that point was where they stopped relating Niburian time to Earth time and set up the Nibiruan calendar that was then followed by the Jewish people, starting in 5760 BCE. Well, that turns out to be, or 3760 BCE. That's the exact time, I believe, that calendar was instantiated, and it was for that reason to commemorate Nibiru's passage. So if you do that, and it takes 3,600 years to pass, subtract that from 3760, you're down to 160 BCE. My data shows that that was approximately the time. So if you back up from that date back to the end of the Ice Age, it fits. So I've stuck by that pretty closely. And that means if you subtract another 3,600 years, its passage perihelion is quite some time out. But I could be absolutely wrong if that document's wrong. But because of that document, Zechariah and Sitchin and I were off by about, well, he believed it was about 5,000 BCE, or about 4,800. So we were off by about 1,100 years.
Well, if you base it on mainstream historians and you look at Gilgamesh somewhere around 2,800 BC, that would put Nibiru coming back just a short time after, about 500 AD. Would we have seen it come by? And were there any historical?
500, not 500 AD.
No, I'm not per your research. This is per mine.
Oh, go ahead.
This is per me, which means nothing. Okay. Means nothing, by the way. But what I'm saying is, in the last, is there any historical records of Nibiru coming by in modern times, post Jesus?
Well, no.
There isn't, is it? So
3,600 years from 160 BCE.
Right, exactly.
But we do have records of it from the Egyptian priests who were monitoring all these floods. They had all the accounts.
Right.
4 major ones and many minor ones that were caused by this transit.
So here's the $1 million question, and then we'll take a quick break. Where is Nibiru now, and when can we expect it? What's your calculations?
Well, the only people that truly know that are the ones that have the telescopes to see it.
Right.
So anybody that's making inference about where it is or what is without a scope, you're in the dark. You don't really know. And so I will tell you the 2 marker points that I have that can possibly be used to make an inference. Okay. First of all, I gave you the 160 BCE forward. So that means it's another 1,400 years out.
Right.
Not 3. But if you look at what Dr. Harrington was working at the U.S. Observatory in Washington, D.C., and Sitchin met with him in the early 80s. They corroborated their data, and I stuck a picture up on my Facebook page, and it's on my website as well, that shows the orbital path of Nibiru according to Harrington and according to Sitchin. They were exactly the same, except for Harrington told Sitchin he hadn't counted for the precession of equinoxes correctly, so that it came through a different house, but it was the same pattern. So he believed it was Nibiru or Planet X. back in '83, and there were 5.
Let's stop right there because I want to talk about Harrington. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, bespoke radio for the masses. We are talking with Gerald Clark. It is an Anunnaki and Nibiru evening here on the Dark Matter Radio Network. If you have any more questions, you can. I'm sorry I'm neglecting Twitter tonight. I'll get back to those before we get out of the show, I promise. Also, Gerald, maybe in about 15 minutes, we'll take some phone calls if that's okay. We'll open up the phone lines.
I hope we can take an opportunity to connect the Anunnaki of Nibiru to my new book and how it connects to now.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. But let's talk about Dr. Harrington for a second. Because he was an astronomer for the U.S. Naval Observatory. So I would say, without going out too far out on a limb, he was an official of official capacity.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
He was a government employee with a government paycheck.
Exactly.
Okay.
So he risked a lot by meeting with Zechariah Sitchin
in 1983.
It was videotaped. I have it on my YouTube channel.
I've seen
under
it.
The Anunnaki Nibiru playlist. That video is still there.
That's a crazy video. Oh, by the way, somebody on Twitter. Hold on, Gerald. Any of the Fadernauts on Twitter, go over to Gerald Clark's YouTube page. It's Gerald Clark. Grab the Harrington video and post that link in Twitter because that is an eye opener of a video.
That one and the disclosure from the Anglo-American Mining Corporation made this theory from Sitchin something I could not ignore anymore. So, and that coupled with the genetic knowledge they were talking about, pre-diluvial, at least 12,000 years ago. It turns out it was 220,000 years ago when they did the genetic upgrade.
Exactly.
And we have proof of that from the genetic Eve and the genetic Adam study.
So Sitchin, and tell us what happened. So Sitchin and Harrington, Sitchin visits Harrington.
Yeah. It turns out that Harrington had received Sitchin's book and had been a kind of a long-term follower of his as well. And so Harrington got his book and then invited Sitchin to come and do an interview with him. And they brought the camera crew. So it was very interesting. So Sitchin was there to find out what corroboration Harrington thought was true about Nibiru. Well, it turns out that they launched an IRAS, an infrared astronomical scope, to go find whatever caused the perturbation of Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus's orbit and displacement along their rotational axis. So he had a reason to go look out there, and it corroborated with what Zechariah Sitchin had disclosed in the Enuma Elish. So I actually spent a lot of time on the Enuma Elish, which is our solar system creation account. But when you read it and it's told from their standpoint and how their planet got caught in our solar system, it makes a lot more sense. So Harrington was aware of that as well, having read the Enuma Elish. I'm still getting a little echo. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. And then today, the announcement over the last week from the UK and Spain about the two planets must exist beyond Neptune and Pluto in order to explain the orbital behavior of objects that are further out. And by them saying, and this is the other thing that I thought was funny, because they, in this announcement, they kind of renamed Pluto as a planet by saying planets must exist beyond Neptune and Pluto. So they're calling Neptune and Pluto planets. Well, we know Neptune is. So I guess Pluto's back in the house.
I didn't get that. They were still talking about it being, this puny little thing, and it didn't meet its size constraint. So I think it's ridiculous. First of all, our progenitors, the Anunnaki, recognize it as a planet and put it in their creation account. Take it out if you want, but it's still a real body that shows up in our heavens. Call it what you will.
Well, can we talk about that for a second?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
How, unless the Anunnaki are involved, How do the Sumerian texts, how does mainstream archaeology account for them naming the planets and their orbits and our existence being the seventh planet, counted from the outside in, not from the inside out, everybody?
They don't. Listen, we didn't discover Pluto until 1930.
1930.
We're talking about documents that are 8,000 years old, and they have approach plates to the Earth pointing out the other planets in clay. So we're just, one of these days, mankind is going to wake up and stop letting the oppressors tell them that the truth is a myth.
Well, at what point do they just call uncle and give in? This
close.
isn't...
It's close. Listen, it's close.
Yeah.
There are so many people that are getting exposed to this information, and they're waking up. I guarantee you, it's close. And it's unstoppable.
When you look at... we're going to segue into modern times here. When you look at how... the Anunnaki, the war machine, the weapons, how they fought, how they treated humans back then, and the cloning and everything else that went on, the manipulation of the DNA. I look at us today with the wars and how we treat each other on Earth. It appears to me, and this is where I want your comment, it's just in our DNA, and we can't help ourselves.
Well, I actually addressed that in my book. I started asking myself in the later chapters where I was talking about Albert Pike predicting a third world war involving Russia and the United States. I mean, all the wars were predicted, and if you go back and read these Illuminati documents, they made all three of them happen. The third one's just upon us now. So, ask me the question one more time. I think I got a little angst.
The way that we act today is the way that it was demonstrated in the Sumerian text, and is it just in our DNA and we can't help ourselves?
Well, I think their behavior was very stern. It was almost contractual. You violated one letter of the law, and I mean, your city might get nuked. Read the lamentation in my book. Okay, so I think their personalities ranged everywhere from serial killer to saint, like I've said. Enki was massively intelligent, wise, and loving, whereas Enlil was all about he loved destruction. I mean, everywhere from the Atrahasis forward, everywhere he shows up, look for destruction.
So, when the question is asked, where did the Anunnaki go? It's that they've never left. Oh, I think I lost Gerald. I did. Okay, good spot to take a break. I'm going to take 5. This is Fade to Black. We are talking with Gerald Clark. I'm going to reset. We'll be back right after this. Bespoke radio for the masses. Oh, what happened? What happened to my audio? It's coming now. Relax. Everything is fine. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, talking to Gerald Clark. It is an Anunnaki and Nibiru evening here. I'll be back right after this. Shoot us an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. We'll get you your Twitter, and we'll take calls when we come back.
And I listen to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Jimmy Church.
My name is Alan, and I listen to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
He's always giving it to you straight.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio, The Revolution.
All right, while we're waiting for Gerald to come back, he just texted me, said he's got a network outage. He's resetting on his end. So I will take some phone calls. and maybe we'll time it, and you can hang out until Gerald comes back with us. 323-825-5045. 323-825-5045. Great evening here on the show. 323-825-5045. You can also Skype in Fade to Black 14. And I'm watching Gerald text here now, and he'll be right back with us here in a second. 323-825-5045. 323-825-5045. What we were just talking about, and it's very important with Nibiru. Now, look, everybody has heard my opinions on Sitchin and Nibiru over the last year, and with all of the discoveries that have been happening, not only with Göbekli Tepe, but with the text and the Sumerian tablets, it just appears to me I can't go into denial when you look at things like the Zodiac, them calling us the seventh planet from the outer ring, counting in. We're talking thousands and thousands of years ago. How did they possibly know this without telescopes? Unless the knowledge came in from somewhere else. And I find it fascinating. You can't go into denial mode with any of this. You can't say that, well, they just knew. And one of the things about the Orthodox archaeology out there, when they say things like, well, you know what, you're not giving man enough credit. We were smart back then. We had the same brains. We knew that. Well, you know what? We didn't have telescopes in 5000 BC. There's just no, well, man looked to the stars. They were able to. No, we didn't discover Pluto until 1930. It's that simple. And for all of this to be documented like it is with the Zodiac and the wobble of the Earth and the precession and 26,000 year cycles, there's just no way that prehistoric man had this knowledge from just looking up to the stars. It's something that I don't buy into anymore. So there you go. I'm trying to get Gerald back on the line. I am going to take a quick break. I think we got him. Gerald, are you there?
Okay. I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Let me reset my mic. I'm getting an echo. I'm going to try and
Okay, go ahead and reset. And Gerald can hear me. So I will say this. When you look at
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you. Is Gerald is
got
this?
Me now? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, we're cool. Is this, Gerald, with Orthodox archaeology, and this is the comment that I was just making after we came back after the break, with Orthodox archaeologists out there saying, you know what, you're just not giving man credit enough. We were smart back then. Well, we didn't have telescopes in 5000 BC. You know, to be able to know about precession,
exactly.
Yeah, to know about all of these things that and Pluto and how many planets we had in our solar system, and to be able to account for all of that. Not only this isn't oral legend. This is stuff that was documented and written down in text.
Well, exactly. It's on clay tablets in museums. You can go see it today,
and you can see the transcriptions yourself. There's all kinds of spots. I think it's is it the University of Chicago, their website that's got.
Well, there were three major hubs: University of Chicago, University of Pennsylvania, and then the Oxford University in England. And of course, the Germans were into archaeology, the Japanese, others were, but the English seemed to end up with most of them. The Europeans end up with most of the tablets, it seems.
Well, you can go to the University of Chicago's website and look at the transcriptions in real time. And you can also learn how to read it yourself, too, as well.
Right. I got a document that was dated 1909 from the University of Pennsylvania, and I think I put it in my first book. It's really thick document that one of the German graduate students was part of the Babylonian project, and they went and got a bunch of tablets from Mesopotamia, brought them back, and he was learning how to decode them. And he was showing I've still got the document. It's an amazing document. He shows you all the name of the gods and, the names of the cities and how to decode the language. And eventually it turned into a Sumerian Unicode text that you can download the script for your computer.
It's totally. Can you read it? Can you read it now? Can you look at it and pretty much get through it?
Some of the symbols I've memorized for the main gods, like I could spell a few of their names easily with their text.
Right.
And you realize that the cuneiform script was a script language so that other languages could be represented with that script. And that's what showed up on the cliffs of Behistun in Persia, was this Rosetta Stone that was written 3 languages. That's how we learned how to read these things.
That's right. This comes in from Nancy Nurse. She says, there are hieroglyphs at various ancient sites of the red handprint. Is this a mark of the Anunnaki?
I have no idea. It's the first time I've ever heard of it.
Okay. Let's see. What does...
But you can go to the cliffs of Behistun and see a picture of Enki hovering above Darius, the king of Persia, and also see his picture on the Temple of Persepolis. Beautiful, beautiful depiction of him.
Oh,
those
carvings on that cliff will stop you in your tracks.
Imagine being the hobby archaeologist that shimmied up there 1,700 feet off the desert floor.
It's incredible.
This is not shot.
No.
He got up there with a piece of paper and did lead pencil etchings of it to take back to the British Museum to figure out what it said.
Yeah, I've looked at all the high-res pictures. It's
amazing.
It's amazing. What does Gerald think of Robert Morningsky and the Terra Papers info?
Gerald doesn't spend much time on that.
Okay.
Gerald's more focused on the Anunnaki benefactors that had recorded records that told us what our fate and destiny were. That's what I'm focused on, because that's how it impacts us.
Well, who do you think the oppressors are?
Well, we know what their symbols were, and we know what they did in the past. So I'll just tell you straight up. The sign of the eagle is Enlil's. He's the Lord of the air. He always has been back in the record. Okay. The sign of the double eagle is his son, Ninurta, also known as Apollo. Okay. I believe those two are the head of the Illuminati New World Order. And Lucifer is another name for Enlil. Okay. Allah, the god of the crescent moon, this ought to shock every Muslim, is the son of the Enlil in the Lamentation of Ur. Also in the Atrahasis, you see, he's got a relationship with Enlil. It's his son. So the moon god is the son of Yahweh. Okay, your head spinning yet?
Yes, it is. Keep going.
Okay, keep going.
Spin it right off of me.
As we look further into this account, relating who did what to whom, we realize that the being who was raising consciousness in the mystery schools where Jesus disappeared for 20-something years, right?
Right.
And was a graduate of the mystery school
yes.
under Thoth.
Yes.
And then turned around and went up into the Levant to do a dying, rising God ritual. Well, guess where he got that? Everybody that graduated the mystery school was a fourth dimensional being that could have an experience with no body because Thoth trained him that way. And so everybody that graduated from that had the energy of Thoth. That was the mystery. That was the secret. He's the one that enables that, and you'll see that in the Emerald Tablets. Okay, he can do that. He's the initiator that can take you out of the 3D hologram that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
So he had the audacity with the plan from his father Enki, which was described in the Atlantis launching point, where he tells him, you're going to Egypt, you know what the plan is. You're going to wake up the hairy barbarians. Well, once that leaked over into the Levant, this mystery school teaching, now we're in the Lord of Command territory in Mesopotamia. And he has no interest in the primitive workers waking up. Never has and still doesn't. He would just as well like to see every one of us wiped off this planet time and again, and he's tried it. And he's probably succeeded in other species we don't even know about that have been used and abused and wiped out. So, where does that land us? You want to continue with Egypt and Thoth's role there? And how it relates to Jesus?
Also, yes.
Okay.
But
let's put a fork. Let's put a fork in it. Jesus was another incarnation of Nishida, who was Thoth. He had hundreds of incarnations when you read the Emerald Tablets. Now, keep in mind, he was sent here as an immortal being on behalf of Anu to help those downtrodden primitive workers that his son created, and they were being trampled on by the Enlilites. Okay?
Yes.
So he tried to intercede the bearer of the Caduceus, and guess what happened to him? He ended up being tortured to death on a symbol that looked like the Caduceus, but was actually a crucifix. So everybody that's using that symbol is perverting the true being that upgraded you and was here to raise your consciousness. You should be venerating his symbol, the Caduceus, not a Roman death symbol. You've been lied to.
When it comes to fourth dimensional beings, is this on the Emerald Tablets, or is this coming from the Sumerian text?
Absolutely. He describes the entire construct of our multi-dimensional universe, and in particular describes the quarantine prison planet that we're in, living according to the illusion of Ka. So here's the bottom line. Our energy and our archetype came from Enki. He gave us in our design a special energetic connection that can be activated that gives you the power and the right to return back to the home of the Anunnaki as your personal home. And that's described in the tablets. What's interesting to me is they stop talking about Nibiru and they start referring to this sixth dimensional place that they've allocated just for themselves, the high-ranking ones, Osiris and his kids, Isis and Thoth. They call this the ancient home of their ancestors. Now, in the earth, he describes as in the third dimension. We're trapped here, and we cannot leave without his authority. How does that work? Energetically, he has the ability to work with your Ba energy. That's what they call it. That energy is derived from the sun, soul, spirit, from the creator of all.
Well,
that's your right. That's your right. And you're eternal. You just don't know it.
And when it comes in terms of, I've got some calls coming in here. I'm going to bring one in. We'll just... caller, just stay there on hold for a second. When it comes to the Illuminati, not the Bulgaria Illuminati, the original Illuminati, was this the Anunnaki, or was this the teachings of the mystery schools that were leading into that, or was there a direct bloodline coming from?
No, there's a direct bloodline occurrence here. So you have to realize that Enlil landed his energy in Rome. Okay, the Roman mafia religion and the real mafia were his doings. Okay, so knowing that he was in Rome and that Constantine, while they were absorbing all the other kingdoms and countries and the peoples that they ruled, all the way over to Istanbul, to the East Roman Empire, right? There's a large swath of land. All the religions, all the belief systems got incorporated into the Roman culture. And their deal was, we'll let you believe what you want as long as you pay your taxes. So they just integrate them with their existing belief system. And actually, Christianity, the Christmas story was integrated with the holiday of Saturnia, that happened from December 21st to the December 23rd. And this is when the sun reaches its darkest night, the winter solstice, and turns around and starts coming the other way, leading towards spring.
The birth of the sun.
Yeah, three-day ritual was used as part of this dying, rising God symbolism through many, many cultures. So the idea of a virgin birth, a God dying, dispensing this frequency to the people, and then being raised up in 3 days. This happened a lot. It wasn't just once.
Right. Well, all the cultures saw the same thing with the rising sun and the longest day of the year and so forth. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Gerald Clark. Who's calling?
Hey, this is Mark from Atlanta, Georgia.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
Hi, Mark.
Say hi to Gerald.
Good. I just had a quick question. I'm just curious. So ultimately, what, in your opinion, is the Anunnaki's end game? What's their mission? Why are they doing these things? What are they going after?
What's the end game? Well, it depends on what's their goal. Which Anunnaki you're talking about. There are Anunnaki that have a mission for mankind, and it has to do with raising our consciousness and making us one of them. That's what becoming the sons of God in John 1:12 is about. If you energetically wake up your chakras and it'll change your DNA. That's what the Katusha indicates with this hidden latent energy. Now, in the Hindu tradition, they call it Kundalini, and the Emerald Tablets, they call it the ball. Well, if this gets triggered and comes on, then essentially this represents, at its crescendo, apotheosis, just like what happened to George Washington in the rotunda of the Capitol building. They show him as becoming apotheotic, becoming a god. Well, whose other pictures are on the rotunda? Ningshitas and Ankis, Hermes and Poseidon. They're both there. And I put this in my book. You have to ask yourself, what level of influence did they have in setting up America? And then are they still involved now? This is the really interesting part. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah. No, definitely.
Where are we really going? Where's the absolute end game?
Thank you, Mark.
Absolute end game for us is to activate our Ba energy, figure out the commands and the key words to present at the portal, at the duat, just like the Egyptians do. You get past Osiris through the two dimensions that separate the earth dimension from Arulu. Now you're in the sixth dimension. That's our ultimate destiny. And once you get there, it doesn't stop. Listen, those beings everybody is on an evolutionary of consciousness path. Thoth describes this, that there are 14 dimensions below us, that they're not as far along as we are.
Right.
Okay. So where does it go eventually? The last place you can go where there's no further, he describes as the circle of light, which is used to create all matter. Okay. And he said that space belongs to the creator of all alone.
Any reincarnated Anunnaki today, do they know that they are reincarnated Anunnaki? Like yourself,
Well,
if you were reincarnated Anunnaki yourself, Gerald, would you know it?
I believe you would. Because listen, what does it mean to be reincarnated? Do you think that an energy cannot go into a body that's not a baby?
I believe in reincarnation.
Because the model is what Thoth tells us is we're avatars, we're containers that can hold energy.
Right.
That energy is quantized based on your consciousness, which maps to either your endocrine system with your pineal gland or your the various glands that map to the seven chakras. Okay, so some view it as a glandular model, and some view it as an energetic model. This is where Edgar Casey and Ida Rolf, who were friends, by the way, discussed that very thing and decided that they were both right. The energy from the nerve ganglia on your chakras influences the glands to cause them to be either on or off in some cases, like the pineal gland.
So when let's get back to the Illuminati and what's going on today.
Okay. Let's lay out the clear picture on the Illuminati.
Yeah, let's do that.
It's such a mess. Let's go back in history. Enlil landed in Rome. They were opposed to the secretive people that represent the Ankyites who founded the Masonic order. These are brick masons that were being taught how to build sacred geometry temples for the Anunnaki in Babylon. That's where the head school was, under Marduk. Okay? So the idea that Enlil was in Rome, subsumed Christianity under Constantine, and was trying to keep any Enkiite influence out of Europe, even up into the Middle Ages. Well, let's look at a for instance. In 1776, Adam Weishaupt founded the Illuminati. Okay, and at that point, it looks like they infiltrated the Masons. Now, why would that have happened? Well, the Illuminati was an organization that was serving the papacy. Okay, so they were highly opposed to any secret societies, and especially anybody who had Zarathustra, Ningshita's knowledge about alchemy. And that meant the use of antimony to produce the Philosopher's Stone. This was going on in the Middle Ages, right, with all the Arthurian legends and such.
Right.
That's what this is about.
Hey, caller, turn your radio down. I'll keep you on hold. Turn your radio down. Okay, go ahead, Gerald.
Okay, so at this point, you have to realize the symbols for Ningshita, the dragon and the pentagram, and Isis' symbol, the five-pointed star, got demonized. And they actually, they started an inquisition, started going after the Enkyites who were a problem for them. So at that point, the Illuminati was formed by the Catholic Church to infiltrate the Masons and make them go away. Okay, so that happened in 1776 in Bavaria. So about that time, there was probably cross-infiltration going from the Masons back to the Illuminati and back and forth.
Right.
So what do we know from one of their chief leaders in 1871, Albert Pike, a high-level Mason who must have come through the Illuminati rank, started making prophecies about future wars involving the major world's players and what their role was going to be to facilitate that. So I put that letter in my books for people to look at that. So you realize we're looking at World War III, and the last two that he predicted went down exactly as he said.
Hi, caller.
So the third one, or to wipe out the Muslim religion, the Judeo-Christian, and the atheists. All three. That's what this last one's for.
Hi, caller. Who are you calling? Or who's calling? Say hi to Gerald.
Hi, am I on the air?
Yeah, you're on the air. You're live.
Excellent. My name is Mike. Hey, Gerald. You have talked about the base up in Nevada and how the military is heavily involved and compromised by the Enlilites. Does Enlil actually have physical presence there? And is he the strategist that is in charge of the overall kind of thing? Because if the military wasn't so active, none of this, I don't think, would be happening. That's how things are getting enforced and implemented. Yeah. And then consequent to that question, okay, go ahead. And then I have one more. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me answer that one before I get too far off. So we know the ex-defense minister of Canada, Paul Hellyer, who served the government for 23 years, came out right before I released my first book, and I saw that, and I listened to that 25-minute video where he testified in front of Congress and said, there's two tall whites down at Indian Springs, Nevada, that have been predicating U.S. domestic and foreign policy since the end of World War II, actually 1945. And I heard that, and then I corroborated that Admiral Byrd's diary, if you go online and look at that, he specifically stated the same thing. Now you look at the end of World War II, this German entourage of scientists and weapons designers, including Werner von Braun, gets brought over to the United States, circumvents genocidal war trials, and gets put in charge of NASA and our weapons programs, our rocket programs. So, whoever the Anunnaki being was that was riling up the Third Reich, working with Hitler, came on over to the United States to make sure fascism didn't die and that war continued.
You said you had a second question for Gerald?
Yeah, go ahead with this.
Yeah, yes. Well, just to clarify, do these entities exist with a different name? If they're great white, do the regular military people physically see these beings?
Yeah,
they
can take on a body in any dimension they want. So if you're in the ninth dimension, their body they take on might be different than what they take on. But the reality is, since there are progenitors and they share our DNA, they try to blend in and look just like us, which they do. And Thoth talks about that in the Emerald Tablets significantly. So he also talks about a race of, not to get too far off the track, because Hellier said there wasn't just tall whites here, there were multiple species here, and they're at war. There's a genetic war going on this planet for dominance and access to resources. So think Star Wars, but it happens all over the galaxy.
What was your next question?
Is the whole Monsanto thing part of that genetic war as well?
Unfortunately, the days of Noah, when they were releasing viruses and cutting off the food supply and all of that, it's being repeated right now. Look at what's going on in the United States. You can't even gather rainwater in Oregon without breaking the law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike.
They're cutting off the water. They've dried up the reservoir underneath California using a weather weapon. You think there's going to be any food this year?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Don't count it. The Ebola virus, the HIV virus, these are weapons that were developed by USAID. They're not an accident. They didn't come from a bat in the jungle.
Thank you.
How come suddenly we're not hearing anything about Ebola? Isn't that interesting? Remember how it was on the news so much?
Well,
where's it gone?
Some brave heroes came out of the woodwork, risked their life, and said, guess what? There's a solution to all infectious diseases, including the enterovirus and anthrax. And we've known about it for a long time, and it has to do with colloidal silver. The hospital industry used to always use it, and all of a sudden, Johnson & Johnson bought it out because they couldn't make any money on it. And there you got antibiotics after that. Colloidal silver kills Ebola. Period. It works.
Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Gerald Clark. Who's calling?
This is Sheila.
Hey, Sheila. Say hi to Gerald.
Hi, Gerald.
Hi, Sheila.
Good to hear from you. I have a question. I repeatedly hear the Anunnaki referred to as reptilian, and there is one man who bills himself more or less as a follower of Sitchin and said that Sitchin believed in that also. I have difficulty with that. How do you feel about that? And are they connected to the Greys in any way?
Thank you, Sheila.
Thanks, Sheila. There's a lot of mystery about the reptilians, and I actually was a bit confused about it because everybody kept insinuating that, well, here's this artifact from the Eridu-Ubaid period that looks alien, and there's all this discussion about reptilian, this and that. Yet you go look at the Sumerian documents that show what they look like, and all their depictions, they look just like us. Now, here's the mystery. In the Emerald Tablets, apparently there's a race of beings that infiltrated the Earth that Thoth was aware of. And these light workers that were affiliated with him knew about it, but the only way they could expose them, and they would always head for the heads of the authorities to take over, just like now. But he said there was a word that they could say as these advanced beings that would unmask their countenance, and you would see they were reptilian. Wow.
Yeah, interesting.
It's like that movie where you had those glasses. I can't remember what was it. If you
They
wear these
live.
glasses,
They live. Yeah, they live.
It's just like that, except they were doing it with sound.
Love that movie.
There really were some very dark entities on here, and he describes more than one and gives you all these tools and sayings to facilitate fighting darkness and filling yourself with light over and over and over. It's all about being full of light. Well, think about that energetically. He's trying to wake his kids up to get to the place where he can graduate them. And the whole Emerald Tablets, that's what it's about. That's the basis of the ancient mysteries.
Hello,
So
Myra. I'm sorry,
the...
Gerald. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hi, Myra. Say hi to Gerald.
Hi, Gerald. It was very, very interesting.
Hi, Myra.
Conversation you guys had. Thank you. Hi. When I was listening, I heard you saying, you know, how they, whoever they are, really like were about the serpent and negative about all these things. And I was wondering about, you didn't mention women. You know how Eve was obviously the instigator and all the, you know, being rejected from the Garden of Eden and such. How do women play in this scenario?
Well, that's a great question. If you go all the way back to the genealogy table, there's some very seminal names that show up on there that represent the maternal archetype that was so important to the Anunnakis. If one of them was trying to make the feminine go away, he was probably the great deceiver, because the reality was the feminine archetype was extremely important. It was so important that their marriage laws were based on perpetuating the maternal or the mitochondrial DNA from the female. So here's a couple of names for you, for instance, and we can talk about Eve if you want. But let's go back even farther. In the Emerald Tablets, two names come up that Thoth mentions in there, and it probably wouldn't mean anything to you unless you're looking at my genealogy table. One of them is Zin Uru. This turns out to be Anu's grandmother, and her spouse is En-Uru. Well, he tells you in the tablets, while the lords of the cycles, these 9 beings that apparently control our chakras and the flower of life symbol that's manifesting the energy that's creating our reality, he discusses this issue with them. Are you with me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know.
Okay. So Zin-Uru is used as a song of the cycles told to Thoth, where they're like using it as a mantra to open a portal through space-time. And they describe how this is done. Quite amazing. Well, it turns out that name is his great-grandmother. So he's telling you this maternal archetype, her name has real power. And then another name comes up, and her name is Ereshkigal. Very important being. In one of the tablets, he does this ritual. He dresses up as the Magnus card, conducts a ritual, and releases this Ereshkigal from the Dark Lord of Arulu. It turns out it's his mother. Enki and Ereshkigal got together. She was an Enlilite, which is interesting. They must have been trying to bridge the gap between these two factions before it got out of control. Ningshita was their kid. So he also talks about, and here's the final trump for the female part. Ningshita himself states he's a hermaphrodite. His energy is composed of Isis and his own. He's been given access to control all beings leaving the portal, including females. Does that help?
Yeah, I was just wondering because in in Genesis and in all the early, it's very negative towards women. So, and you were mentioning all the things that they kind of derived their information from, and you just didn't mention about women. So,
that's yeah.
Yeah.
The fact is, that being in the Old Testament that called himself God, he left everyone went off the council, not just Ninhartsog and Inanna and all the others, and all the spouses. Okay, so there was Anu and Antu, his wife. There was Enki and Ninki. Okay, there were 6 females on the council as well. It was balanced, male and female energy.
There you go, Myra.
Thank
Is
you.
that good?
Yeah.
The feminine is very important from history. In any culture or religion that is denigrating the female, sacred female, is probably an Enlilite. Look at what's going on with the Muslim religion. They can't even go to school or show their face in public.
I know I'm kind of on a, well, we all should be on a feminist kick, but I am definitely on one right now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Well,
you guys.
you'll read
Thank you,
right
Myra.
at the dedication of my book, right at the front. Not only do I dedicate the book to my wife, but later on in the acknowledgments, I acknowledge all the females that were involved in our Genesis account. It's very important to me.
How can such supposedly advanced beings be so spiritually unadvanced?
Well, like I said, you got to decide which ones you're talking about. You can't call them all that the way, because some of them were, as far as I can tell, when you get deep into the Sumerian or the Emerald tablets, you'll realize that the bearer of the 3-forked prong was the creator of all's right-hand man. Wow.
Well, when
you read that, you'll find that out.
Yeah, I'm looking at a picture of that right here. Yeah.
When you go read about the attributes of the creator of all in the 15th tablet of the Emerald tablets, there were 3 aspects of this and 3 of that and 3. And then you realize that Enki was the one coming from there, bearing those 3 aspects on his trident, and was the dweller in Atlantis.
Well,
dealing with Enlil in the same account. He calls them the Dark Brothers of the Dark Lord.
Were the Anunnaki religious themselves? Did they have a
Absolutely.
god?
Yes. Enki was very, very venerative toward the creator of all. Absolutely. And so was Thoth. We see how Thoth talks about the creator of all. They're very honoring and realize they're just part of the game. And they see themselves facilitating the role for all these beings to evolve back to the place where they have a closer relationship with the creator of all.
Well, Walter just tweeted, he says, reincarnation at will, immortality, yet spiritually dark and destructive. Such a contrast. It doesn't seem possible.
Not all of them.
So
the Enlilites and a few of the sellouts like Nergal, who left, and Enki was disgusted with it because he joined Ninurta to blow up the Sinai spaceport. So anybody who was making war, Enki was not about that. He was more like Gandhi. Read about it. Everywhere he went, it was paradise.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Garden of Eden, Atlantis, Persia. By the way, I want to talk about that. Persia, Iran was founded by Ningshita, Enki's son.
Well, we have Gerald
being looked to be made go away.
Gerald, we have 5 minutes left. We can probably stretch it to 6 if we roll into the credits.
Okay.
So where does that leave us today?
Where's that leave us today? I'm gonna do this real fast for you.
Break it down.
Thoth is your consciousness coach, and he holds the key, just like Jesus said. He holds the key to the kingdom. Okay, he's very specific about that. If you do the 2 prerequisites for alchemy, subjugate your ego and purify your consciousness, he will initiate you. That's the mystery. You'll start at, he can be in the halls of Amenti and be roaming the earth, visiting simultaneously as many bodies as he wants. So when that starts happening to you and you do those 2 prerequisites, don't be surprised. He's trying to wake up your Ba energy and take you back to a 4th dimensional graduate, just like the mystery schools. That's, by the way, what the Masonic Order was supposed to be doing in their little Egyptian temples here in America. There's no alchemy going on in there ever since 1895, when the Judeo-Christian was supplanting Ningshita in that organization. It happened in England. At the same time, the being Enoch was venerated over Lamech. Well, here's the secret. The Emerald Tablets came from the Pillars of Atlantis. They're the character codes for you to meet the prerequisites and graduate back to your destined home. Welcome to the reality. Now you know. And this book has not only all that you have to do, but I've broken it down where even a 17-year-old hillbilly from Arkansas could figure this out the way I wrote it.
Is that
time?
Well, is
the gate is wide, but the ignorance level is preventing you from going through the gate.
Is that why we have the symbols of the eagle and double eagle here in the United States?
Yes, sir. And they also just showed up on the flag with St. George smiting the dragon on Russia's flag. So they're playing both sides, okay? And I would tell you that the Yankeites aren't going to tolerate it much longer. Much longer. They will strike, and the dark is going to be banished from this earth. The zodiacal ruler, Thoth, Ningshita, Jesus, is going to take over the Anunnaki Council of 50, and it's his gig, the next zodiacal house. 2,160 years.
You had mentioned, I don't want to let this slip by, you had mentioned the Muslim religion getting wiped. Is that what's happening now?
Yes. The Israel and the Palestinians and the whole Muslim world are intentionally being divided and brought against each other by a father-son destroyer team. Enlil and Nanarsin, his son.
So
all those primitive workers out there that are doing this fighting on behalf of Allah and Yahweh.
Right.
Now, no. Here's my advice to you. Put your damn guns down, pick up the Emerald Tablets, fan your energy body, and get out. Graduate. Don't sacrifice yourself for some dumb promises about multiple virgins. Could you imagine them all menstruating at the same time? Oh, my gosh.
Well, I think they're all a little shocked when they get there and they find out that
the dark word of Arulu deceived them their whole life. Mm-hmm.
I want to thank you for coming on the show. All of your books are, both of your books are available at Gerald Clark 77. Are you speaking anywhere right now? What are you doing besides this show, obviously?
Well, you have to understand, based on the kind of stuff I'm saying, probably not a very popular person with the analytes right now. So I'm keeping a little bit of a low profile, but I am scheduled to be a contact in the desert. But the real good news is I talked to my wife today, and we're going to start broadcasting ourselves.
Oh, good. Good for you.
Interview you, so pretty soon.
Well, we'll be obviously we'll be out of contact in the desert too as well. Looking forward to seeing you out there. We'll be broadcasting live Friday night, the 29th, from one of the halls. We'll get you on stage for that if you aren't doing your presentation somewhere else at Contact. And
well, I might be on stage in a mega church here very shortly. I've been getting invited to come speak up there because they finally figured out what I wrote between my first book and the linkage to the second book, that there's going to be a spiritual revolution, that cross is coming down and the Caduceus is going up, just like I said last year.
Well, I would love to be there. I'd love to be there when you drop the Jesus as a fourth dimensional bomb on the audience.
Yeah, well, it's not me. It's Thoth. He's the one that tells you in the document. As a matter of fact, he lays out the model of the dimensions and the portals and such so well. I've been approached and asked to write a video game based on it. It's so unbelievable.
I got to thank you for coming on the show. I can't wait to get you back on. We'll certainly see you at Contact in the desert. Gerald, again, thank you. It was all that and more. It was worth waiting for the last year, and I hope you had a great time.
We got lots more, so let's do some more sometime.
You got it. Thank you, Gerald. You have a great night and a great weekend.
And farewell to all your listeners. And
everybody say good night to Gerald and Twitter. I'll talk to you soon, Gerald. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye now.
Gerald Clark, everybody. Thank you so much. We waited a year for this broadcast, and I got to say, it was all that and more. Thank you so much. And that tomorrow night, Angela Smith, Dr. Angela Smith will be with us. Coming up next is The Unexplained. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Kamarian. Show's produced by Hilton J. Paul, Mark D. Kovar, LJ3, Renee, and Jonas. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vateau, and Mark D. Kovar. Fady by Dale. Webmaster